Very good. Thank you. All right, folks, let's get started then, because we have a very short time to meet tonight. There wouldn't be a lot of questions, I'm sure. So, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for your participation tonight by taking the time to come and ask questions. Reopening of schools is a very complex issue, as you all know. Lots of moving parts and not all clear picture at all. So it's been, because of that and because of the current, health situation in the country, the reopening of schools continues to generate a lot of questions and concerns, and so. So it's tough times for all of us, uncharted waters for sure. We hope to answer as many questions as possible tonight on our plan to reopen schools. This afternoon, we published the enhanced version of the plan that will be discussed with the school committee on Thursday for their final approval. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but it's already posted on our website. It's the plan with enhanced features and more information there. We also have tonight, we have about an hour and a half for this meeting. We have received over 40 questions via email as well. So to maximize our time together, I ask that you pose your questions in a brief and concise manner so we have time to answer it, and also to allow as many participants to ask their questions as well. We hope to answer some of the questions that we received via email as well in the end if we have time. If we need some extra time in the end, we will do so, but we'll have a hard stop at 9 p.m. So, again, even though we have received a lot of questions via email, we will answer all those questions and add those questions to our FNQ document that's on a district website right now. We'll continue to populate that document. So we already had, we are working on, and we'll be able to launch that soon, all the questions that came as a result of the parent survey. We have prepared all those questions and answers. We're going to be adding to that document, and we'll take care of all these questions they have received in the last couple of days, and we'll add to that document as well. So you have that in the next couple of days. Also, we have several teachers present with us tonight. So if your question is related to work conditions or areas that I believe will be part of future negotiations, I will indicate so, and we have to move on, okay? We also, I will call the participants' names in order they were received, when you applied to be here tonight with us. Also, I have tonight here with me the members of the task force to help me answer some of the questions that you may have tonight. So with any further ado, I'll ask Kathy to start, calling the first person, and someone from HUD-TV will unmute you so you can ask your question. All right. So let's see how many people we can actually accommodate tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. The first name is Cindy Perez.
We don't have the ability to unmute you, so you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, thank you, Tom.
Just another quick comment. I know some folks who use Gmail, we've seen that some emails are getting caught in the spam folder. So I don't know if it's possible some folks have gotten emails that maybe they didn't see because they got sent there. I just want to point that out for folks who maybe are trying to log in now.
Okay.
Can you repeat the name of the person?
Yes, it's Cindy Perez.
I just checked the list of participants. She's not on with us yet.
Okay.
Let's move on, and then when she comes back, we'll accommodate her.
Sure. So the next one is the Anastasia I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce this. Anastasopoulos family.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Leah. I have 2 kids at Morrow. One is going into 1st grade and one is going into 3rd grade. I want to thank you guys all for all the work you did. And I know that I watched the last video of, it was like 3 hours long or something with the school committee, and just trying to wrap my head around all the work you guys do with this balancing act, and it's completely incredible. So thank you so, so much. I have complete respect for you. My concern is not about COVID. It is about the education of my kids. And I know I sent an email to Marco and I think Sardella and the teachers that my children had last year. And I know that last school year was a surprise to all of us. Still, I'm worried, and I'm trying to find a way to word it correctly. I literally like tried to write down my questions, and like it ended up being like a novel and like etc. So I'm just not like the kind of person that is well with this. Hence the fact that I'm not well with organizing homework and trying to teach my children at home remotely. I am not against remote learning. I do believe it's the future, whether we like it or not. I think we have to get used to it. So I'm not against it. I really need to say, I can't do the schoolwork. I can't do the schoolwork. And I don't know how the teachers feel about me saying that. And please don't judge me. I know your job is very hard, especially if you have children at home. I can't imagine, because I was working at home with the children virtually. And it was a nightmare. And so I don't really know what my question really is. It's just that with the younger kids, especially being more than, especially having more than one kid. And I know that you kind of tapped on this before when Nina asked that question, which was like, I was waiting for that question, but it was difficult for me, as I was saying, to like fully comprehend it and like visualize it and wrap my head around it. It's like, I don't know what it is until I can see it. And I really feel that same way with my children, is that the remote learning is going to be difficult for my children because they can't do it on their own until they can do it on their own. And I feel like I want to see those teachers that we all had and we all have had, remembering that one teacher or two teachers that really like, we were like, yes, like they helped me, you know. I know there's teachers out there that just never smile, and their heart's not in it. I don't know what it is, but it just makes me sad. And I want to be reassured that with the remote learning, the teachers are going to be, embracing this. And my child deserves the best education out there, COVID or no COVID, flu or no flu. And I'm not the one. I'm not the one that can try to do all these passwords and upload all these apps and if they have an assignment that a teacher is giving to the child to do at home without the teacher either physically there or virtually there, it's not going to work for me.
Sure.
Not for their ages. Is it 3 minutes? I'm sorry. Was that?
Yeah. No, that's okay. I think I understand your question.
Okay.
We know how much of a burden has been for all the parents to assume and have to incorporate the job of a teacher while at work, at home and also working. It has been a daunting task for everybody, and recognize that, this past spring has been such not only a learning curve, but also the realization that how difficult it is to substitute what learning is in the classroom with what we're trying to do within remotely. So remotely is not optimal. We know that. And even though I am recommended to the school committee for a hybrid model, I am considering a number of factors, that today, in today's time, in today's information and data that we have today, That's probably our best way of engaging students in a meaningful way that is face-to-face with the teacher. And then the way we're preparing the remote learning right now is going to be way more intense and sophisticated in a way that will allow parents to get some relief on what has happened in the past, where you're there to fend for yourself, quote unquote. We're going to structure the day, make sure that the student sees their teachers and their peers every single day, even remotely. So it will be a whole new experiences, but at the same time, we hope that very soon, once we start the new year, hopefully things will get better and better, that we can go back to an in-person modality, because nothing can replace the classroom experience. And even the classroom experiences that we are creating right now is going to be very different than the experiences the students had before. And that's unfortunate, but that's our way of ensuring that not only students will have the best time with their teachers, the bonding, that kind of relationship that needs to happen, but also when they're home, they, to whatever capacity, age, and maturity level, can be independent in a way, but also allowing parents to breathe a little bit, because we know that we put a lot on your plates last spring when we're trying to reinvent what would public education look like remotely. So I understand that.
Here that is around that grade that might be able to relate to the actual experience by any chance, as to what I'm talking about as well?
Yes, I can. I absolutely can, for both of my kids. And Marco, the biggest problem families are having is, we understand we were thrown into this as parents and teachers and staff.
I don't have a master's degree here.
No one saw this coming, but we as parents didn't get enough. We didn't get enough.
And I don't want that to happen again.
For our kids.
Right.
We learned differently than our children did. Common Core, we don't know what that is as adults. We didn't learn that way.
Sure.
And there was not enough information given to us as parents to help teach our children.
Yes.
Like we have the kindergarten for 5th, 10th, I don't care. We didn't get enough. And the reality is 30 minutes, 3 times a week was not enough.
Oh, no.
And I got so many messages from parents saying, we understand the words coming out of your mouth, Marco, but actions speak louder than words. And we parents don't necessarily trust what the education is going to look like because we can't see it.
Right. So again, our plan right now, we have time to plan. The Department of Education is very specific about the standards of learning that needs to take place remotely. And it will look and feel totally different than what you have experienced in the spring, and that's a major part of our preparedness will be the 10 days that we have with professional development with the teachers prior to the school starting, to make sure that everyone's on board. If you look at the document that we posted today, there are sample schedules about how the routines will look like, remotely and in person. So it's like sample schedules, but you can see there's going to be a completely different experience and much more robust. And I understand that, the challenge that we had before, but the experience moving forward will be totally different.
Thank you, Marco.
Okay.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you for participating.
Thank you.
The next participant is Tiffany Burgess. Tiffany Burgess. She is in the list.
Hi, Tiffany, can you unmute yourself?
Can we also ask that if you've already spoken, you shut off your video or you shut off your audio?
Yes.
Thank you. Tiffany Burgess? Why don't we move on to the next one, and then we'll come back to Tiffany. Hopefully she can join us. I think a lot is happening with the storm right now. The next participant is Julia Terra-Salomon.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Terra-Salomon. I recently just graduated from Hudson High School. I've been in the school system my whole life. And the first question I want to ask is what the protocol will be when someone in the district inevitably does test positive for COVID-19. We can't try to convince ourselves of a pipe dream here. If the district reopens with any in-person component, there will be new cases. I know the district was planning to use cohorts to limit the spread of COVID-19, but even with this precaution, if one student gets sick, presumably all the students and faculty in their cohort would have to quarantine for 14 days. And the district has also recognized that some mixing of cohorts will be necessary. So then those other cohorts would also have to quarantine. So I'm wondering, will the district contact trace and ask students and faculty to quarantine? Clearly the logistics of this are not conducive to learning, but only asking the sick person to quarantine would mean dozens of people who are exposed and thus potential carriers could be spreading it to the schools in Hudson community.
Sure. No,
I also, sorry, I have a lot of thoughts. I also want to address the parent and faculty surveys that were released. One thing I saw was a little bit of wording bias going on. In the parent survey specifically, the first question asked was, quote, in terms of my family's life circumstances and specific situation, the most ideal form of school that could take place in the fall would be, end quote, and then the options were full return with safety modifications, hybrid with an example of 1 week on, 1 week off, and then remote. And so this wording of ideal here, I feel like may have swayed some parents to choose hybrid or full return because I think everyone can agree we would want school to be in person if it could be. That would be ideal. I also think that the difference between the 1 week on, 1 week off, and now the plan for hybrid is 2 days on, 3 days off. That could have changed some parents' answers. And then additionally, in the Portuguese version, ideal was translated to melhor, which directly in English means best. And this isn't to say that translation always has to be word for word or that these small wordings invalidate the survey completely, but I just want everyone to know that it's important to take note these factors could have impacted the results. And then my kind of last point is I have a tremendous amount of concern for the faculty, especially based on their survey. When they were asked about how they felt about returning to work, 24.1% said they would either resign or retire for return, or that they could not return to work because they or someone they care for is in a high-risk category. And then if we add in faculty who said they wouldn't return or couldn't return if they didn't have childcare, it's 42% of faculty. But I'd also like some clarity on the numbers in the survey because another figure said that 74.7% are able to return but are nervous. So clearly the numbers don't add up, but I'm wondering, were the faculty able to choose multiple options? Is that what's going on? But either way, I'm wondering, how can we reopen if up to 42% of faculty may not be able to return? Are teachers going to be able to opt into teaching remotely, like families can opt into learning remotely? Or are they going to be forced to choose between risking their health or resigning? And if teachers inevitably have to quarantine, will that come out of their sick leave, which many don't have enough to cover 1 full 2 weeks, never mind multiple? Or will they just teach remotely during this time? And then if teachers are instructing remotely, I feel like doesn't that sort of defeat the purpose of doing a hybrid model in the first place? My biggest concern here is just I think we see a clear difference in opinion between faculty and families. And I feel like as much as we have to listen to the families, that everyone's a part of this, but we also really have to listen to the concern that faculty are clearly expressing. By being in school all 4 days in a hybrid model, they are going to be at a very high risk if we return in person. And it feels like months ago, everyone was worshiping them for all the hard work they do. And now it feels like if their lives are at risk, that's what has to happen. And to me, that just doesn't seem moral. And so I also feel that the fact that this event is going to be ending at 9 p.m. tonight is somewhat disrespectful to all the community members. I understand it's a long night and that you have put in a lot of hard work, and I appreciate that. But if everyone has concerns, they should be able to have them voiced and answered, especially if you're asking people specifically to get on board with a plan that has a lot of questions still in it. And as a recent student and faculty and community member, right now I have the power to speak today and ask you to do remote learning, but really it's up to the superintendent and school committee to make the decision, and they have the direct ability and, in my opinion, the moral obligation to first protect the health and lives of students, faculty, and community members. Because we've seen the evidence is still out on COVID-19, whether just getting sick could leave people with permanent lung and heart damage. So even excluding the possibility of death, there can be terrible outcomes. and they're very real possibilities. So considering this, I'm frankly disappointed that the conversation has been focused on how reopening will happen, as opposed to whether we should return with an in-person component at all. And I know I've brought up a lot of points and questions, and like everyone else, I have a lot of opinions on this. I know they may be different than other people, but I'm more than willing to kind of go through my points again to make sure all of them are able to be addressed. And again, as much as passionate as I am, I really do thank you for your time and consideration in holding this event.
So thank you. So again, this event is actually to make sure that the school committee receives input from the community about your concerns, your point of views, and then in the end, they're going to have to vote on what plan fits best the Hudson Public Schools. Like I said, I'm recommending to the school committee the hybrid plan, and that's my recommendation to them based on information I have today. 4 weeks from now, we might have to take a whole new transition into something else should the scenario changes drastically, right? So I mean, again, with the information that we have today. Now, in terms of, you had a lot of questions. Try to remember all the, the points that you made. So the hybrid model that we had as an example, week on, week off, we did explore that. And we started putting all the pieces attached to what they're going to look like. It posed more questions than concerns than actually our feasibility to execute it. So that's when we started looking at different models. And this is a very widely utilized models. Almost every school district around Hudson are using the same model because it allows us within a week's time to have the face-to-face teachers and some remote learning and accommodate the parents as well, because that's going to be a challenging feature for anybody. In terms of the return and putting people at risk, I want to be very, very clear about something. We don't mask, we don't deny the fact that there are risks involved. Right? And the same, there are risks when you leave your house. And any given day and go into any type of environment, there are risks. So, and the fact that we probably will have a case or more inside our schools is not if, as is when, right? Because I think there's something that unless the pandemic is completely under control, we will be vulnerable to that. Now, in terms of how do we trace that, the CDC has put very specific guidelines, and there's a link to the guideline in a master plan that I released to everybody. So there's a link to the CDC guidelines, and then they pose several scenarios about situations in which one person or a cluster of people are observing symptoms, and if through the symptoms is identified that the person, either child or an adult, has tested positive, there's a series of steps that need to be taken according to CDC. So our nurses, our administrators will be following those steps, and the contact tracing for us internally as an informal way of doing that, it will be that the cohorts that we have where the students are sitting assigned seats for every classroom they attend, and we're going to try to minimize the exposure or mixture of cohorts. It will happen in some level because we just have to provide services that are multiple students that perhaps are not in the same cohort on a daily basis. So, but we will be able to track those. Now, in terms of if there is a case that's positive or something that is something that it would need to be traced outside our schools, we're going to work very closely with the Board of Health because they're the ones who do the tracking. Now, fortunate to us, our nurses have been involved with the Department of Public Health in Hudson to actually do the tracing for them. So they have been trained, they have access to the database that they do the tracking. So if for us will be a positive already that our nurses already are accustomed to the tracing mechanism out in the community. So the relationship we have with the Board of Health in here in Hudson will be just to contact them and they will trace. If it's somebody who lives in a different community, the same idea, that the Board of Health will take care of the tracing with the other community. So we have the protocols in place. I think what is important also to know is that we can prepare, we can plan, we can have step-by-step detail. We haven't lived this yet. So there is a margin of there's a period that we're going to be living things for the first time, and we're going to be regrouping and be probably either continue what we're doing or regrouping and taking a different path, just because, again, we haven't lived that situation. So we are preparing, we are following every guidelines, we are relying on the health officials to provide us with detailed information on how to do it. We are prepared to do so. Again, in terms of a school community, even though we talk about exposure, and which is it's something that we don't disagree that may happen in any given moment, but we also have to remember that our school is going to be somewhat a controlled environment. So it's going to be very different than you walking into any other institution where there's public access. Our school is going to be limited to the students and the faculty. Even parents will come only by invitation if necessary. So we're going to control our environment, and controlling also maintaining all the mitigation, techniques that we need to have in place, the wearing of masks, the separation. Every classroom, students will be 6 to 8 feet apart. The hand washing, make sure that all these things are present almost like every minute of the day. And also the cleanliness and disinfection of our buildings will be a priority to us. So again, our controlled environment and all the mitigating factors should prevent or delay the spread of something, but it's not foolproof, right? We understand that this can and probably will happen inside of our schools. But again, we follow all the guidelines and steps that we are afforded, by having listening to what CDC is saying to us, our local health officials, and all the other authorities that have been working with the Department of Education. If we follow those steps, I think in my mind, we'll be able to return to school. And again, one day at a time. Every day is going to be a different day. Every week we will be able to look at data, make sure that we are on track. We're going to monitor everything, every step of the way, to ensure that if we need to change routines, or if we need to make something that is more important because we need to maintain the health and safety of our students and staff, we'll do so.
I apologize. I just have one more question. When you're saying that all this, like the hand washing and everything's going to be a part of the everyday routine, how are teachers going to be able to teach when they constantly have to health monitor, and how are students expected to learn when their number one priority is always, am I safe? Am I safe?
Well,
that is something that comes up in my mind. I feel like the in-person component wouldn't be as enriching because the concern would always be the health component, the getting sick.
Right, and that's one of the things that we're going to be, discussing with teachers when the first 10 days that we're going to be together for professional development. But there will be routines such as every time there's any type of movement in and out of the classrooms, there will be hand washing before eating meals, after eating meals. So there will be times in which in the day that is almost going to be mandatory. And unfortunately, this will eat up, the time on learning. We all know that. But is a protocol and a process that we must have in place. So we are preparing all these protocols. The teacher is going to have time to interact with all this information, ask questions, modify as necessary. We are not going to do a cookie cutter kind of approach. Every building has a different dynamics, and we're going to leave to every building to be sure that they can perform the best they can according to the resources that they have and the situations that they have in place. So that's going to be our approach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Beth Langlois.
Hi, thank you for having us again this evening. I appreciate you guys taking the time to have a Q&A for parents. Obviously, there's a lot of concern and a lot of interest, so it's nice to have the opportunity to ask in person. I had a few questions. Sorry. So in the hybrid model, when the kids are logging in from home, are they going to be seeing their teacher, or is that going to be some sort of a different group situation?
When they log, they're going to see their teachers. Okay.
Will they be logging into the classroom, like into the live classroom where some kids are in the room?
So in the morning, for example, when you look at the schedule, I'm going to speak generally about the schedule, right? So for the elementary level, for example, let's take that as an example. There will be a morning routine and an afternoon routine. So be the morning, everybody gets together, the entire classroom plus those who are remote and the teacher, and they have a common time in the morning. Then class starts, and those remotely are working remotely. Then throughout the day, the teacher, the core content teacher, will take time out of her schedule. Somebody gonna substitute for her, gonna cover for her, and she's gonna engage with those who are home. Also live, so they can see the teacher, so she or he can interact with the students at home. And then at the end of the day, there will be also the closing of the day when the entire class gets to get together. So the group A, who's at school, and group B, who are home, all getting together. So they open the day together, they close the day together, and throughout the day, there will be opportunities for teachers to interact with the students at home, the core content. And there also will be occasions where all the teachers are going to be interacting with those students. So not just the content teacher. And then in the meantime, they're also going to be scheduled asynchronous recorded materials that will be provided to the families as well, so they can be incorporated throughout the day. Okay.
And what about technology for parents and families at home? So I know this has already been touched on a little bit. Everybody was thrown into it in the spring. What opportunity will there be a test run, for example? So obviously, even just from this call, we have trouble unmuting, and, is somebody there? Will there be an opportunity for, say, the teacher to spend some time going through some technological opportunities to make sure parents know how to get on and off, and the kids know how to do that as well, know how to turn in their work, make sure they get credit? I think there's a concern now that this is going to be mandatory, which is understandable. We want to move forward. If a child has trouble turning in their work because of a trouble with their account, what will be the consequences there, and what can we do to make sure families feel comfortable?
Yeah, no, there'll be no consequence. What we need to do is work individually with those families and make sure that they have the assistance that they need, right? So I think it would be layers of approach. If a teacher understands that there's a child or a family, not logging in, or there's a difficulty there, I think in that same day we need to understand why. Is that a technical issue? Is it an issue with family trying to uphold their own schedule? So we need to understand what that is. And from that, it's going to be an individualized approach. We are going to make sure that everyone is participating. Participation in the synchronous events is counting as our attendance as well. So and all the postings and things that we have to do are going to be counting as participation. So a whole different modality of learning right now. Everything that's done remotely will count as towards the whatever final grade, and if it's at the high school, it's towards the credit of that student. So everything that's going to be done is going to be that holistic approach. However, we're also looking at how to grade and how to assess students remotely as well, because that's going to be something that we can all use the same kind of types of ways that we did in person now remotely as well. So there'll be some differentiation there. However, everything that the students will do from now on will count. So in terms of ability to do some test run beforehand, we can look into that, the feasibility of that. But I believe that first week of engagement, it will be probably when we learn most of the troubleshooting that perhaps needs to be done so we can assist our families.
Okay. And so when you talk about individually helping, someone who's having trouble, how many students do we have in the district?
2,600.
Okay. And so we have a technological team. We have Ellen Shuck leading the team, and she does a great job. I don't know how many people are on her staff. Approximately 5, 6.
4 or 5, yes.
Right. So will you be increasing staff to help her be with this immense, support?
That's one of the things that we're looking into right now, is to secure another technology specialist to be able to assist Ellen and her team to continue to do the troubleshooting. But we also have to have a way of screening the needs. So maybe there are other people that can help, as opposed to always Ellen's team that they are the ones in the forefront. I think they have to be going to the more technical piece. We should be able to have additional personnel, even classroom teachers, depending on what the problem is, or a technology person in the school, which is not optimal. But we need to find ways of the small problems we can fix it quickly. And if there's something a little more deep in terms of the technology component, then when Ellen and her team steps in.
Okay. Okay. And then one last question for you. If parents choose to, actually, I'm sorry, I have 2 and I'll be quick. If parents choose to stay home, even though the hybrid model is moving forward and they want to keep their child home, will their child still be able to log into the classroom that they were slated for, or will they be put in some other, I see something that says Remote Learning Academy. It sounds, I've heard about outsourcing education.
Well, that's outsourcing only for the high school component. And I'll explain what that is. But what we're talking about here is that, yes, a parent can, if a parent chooses not to send the child to school, it's okay. We are creating a mechanism for the parents to report that. We should be launching that in a couple of days for parents to let us know if they intend or not to send their child to, back to school in whatever modality the school committee votes on Thursday. So once we know that what that is, then we need to understand how many students per grade level per school are within that category, and that's what we call the cohort D. The cohort D will not be the same interaction as the cohort C, A, and B, because C, A, and B are going to be in school and going to be in and out of school all times, and they'll be participating with the teachers. Cohort D is going to be a little more independent in a variety of ways, and may or may not have their current teacher as instructor. So the cohort D is going to be, again, depending on how many students per grade, and how we're going to assist those students to work remotely, more independently, but at the same time with the assistance from personnel, but not necessarily the classroom teacher.
Okay, well, just from a parent's perspective, that's disappointing, because I feel like I would be choosing to tell my child, I'm sorry, you're not going to be with your classmates. I'm not really sure who you're going to be with, but I'm doing it because I want to keep you safe. So I'm not sure I agree with that. I just wanted to share that.
That's fine. But I think what it is there's not enough time in the day for teachers to do everything, right? So teachers are already going to be very busy with the AB component. Realistically and physically, teachers cannot be in a third cohort. So unfortunately, we cannot do that.
Right, but if the student who was chosen to be home could just log in the way that the other half who are already home are doing so, why wouldn't that be the case? Because
they're not receiving instruction with face-to-face with the teacher. So all the instruction, all the new learning going to take place in school and outside school. So another point that I want to stress one more time. The days students are learning at home is not just maintenance of what they have been exposed to on the previous days in school. It will be new learning. It will always be new learning. So the expectation is going to be high for everybody.
Okay. All right. Last question. If the hybrid model is chosen, will all of the administration be attending or going to their jobs in person at Apsley Street?
Yes, everything is going to start on next Monday, the 10th.
Okay, so the whole full staff will be in the building?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your time.
We'll return to the building. Yeah, you're welcome.
The next person is Heather Marco.
Where is Heather with a beautiful last name? Marco.
She is on the list. I'll skip ahead to the next person and we'll go back to see if she's there. The next person is Michelle Weatherby.
Kathy, I can see Heather on my screen. She looks like she's trying to unmute herself.
Oh, okay.
No, still can't hear you, Heather.
No,
I can see her. I can see her video. I can see her trying to fix it, but I can't hear anything she's saying. Maybe we can try again.
Yeah, Heather, we'll get back to you. Okay.
Michelle Weatherby.
Hi, thank you for taking these questions. I wanted to actually just follow up on the question that just came up about those parents opting out in cohort D or even cohort B or A that's remote for the day. Why? Can you explain why can't they just log into the live classroom that's taking place? That just seems crazy to me. It seems like extra work. If the teacher's teaching, does it really matter if the kid is sitting in front of her or sitting on a computer? We all do it for business.
Well, the format is a little different. So let's think of a cohort A that students will stay in school Monday and Tuesday, and cohort B stay in school Thursday and Friday. So on Monday and Tuesday, the teacher is teaching the cohort A, and then on Thursdays and Fridays, the teacher is teaching the same material again for a different cohort. So it's not it's the teacher is teaching twice, the AB, the Monday and Tuesday, and the same material on Thursday and Friday. That's why the students will work remotely. And again, is to provide students with the best experience. So we're trying to get the students, when they are in school, the best, interaction with the teachers. So when we flip the cohorts, they will have the same treatment. So it's not going to be whatever happens Monday and Tuesday is just a continuation throughout the week. There is the teachers teaching twice the same material for both cohort A and cohort B.
So what does cohort A do when they're remote?
If A is remote, B is with the teachers, and if the A has already received the teachers' lessons for that week, then the teacher's repeating that to cohort B.
But what is A doing when cohort B is getting a lesson?
They're continuing with the work.
On their own?
On their own, but also with the teacher. The teacher will direct them every day.
How can the teacher direct them if she's teaching the same material to cohort B? I feel like my kid is going to get 2/5 of the curriculum that they're supposed to be receiving for the year.
No, so we are, again, the times that the students are home is not just a maintenance of what was learned the 2 days they were in person. There'll be new learning going on every single day of the week. So Monday through Friday, students will be exposed to new learning, new materials, and new processes, whatever the lesson plan is at that point in time. We have mapped out the scope and sequence. The standards continues to be the same. So the state expects that none of the curriculum will be modified at this point in time. So coverage of the curriculum will be exactly the same. We just have to modify how curriculum is delivered because we have now the differentiation group, one at home and one remotely. But the coverage, the materials will be exactly the same. One main reason for that is for the state still has not made any decision about MCAS. So by all means and purposes, we need to cover all the materials because state standardized tests will continue to be in place.
Okay. Just a couple follow-up questions really quick.
Sure.
My children are doing summer rec programs, and we have to certify before they appear on the field or on the courts that they are not sick. We have to take their temperatures, and there's a checklist we follow. My business has asked us to do the same thing. There's an app we have to use and certify that we are not sick before entering the building. Will staff and students be doing the same thing?
No, but one of the things that we're going to be instructing parents is we have to work very together with the parents because parents are going to have to do this first screening every morning. Realistically, every parent should be able to understand if in the morning before students leave the house, if there are any potential symptoms, if there is any kind of slight of temperature, anything would consider the student maybe not coming to school because of that reason. So working with our nurses is going to be and our administrators is going to be a crucial factor for parents to make sure that they are the first screening of the day. And then if throughout the morning, if there's any indication on a bus, for example, or upon arrival to school, they'll see the nurse and we'll do our screening ourselves. So for us will be the best solution here will be the parents will do the first screening in the morning before students leave the house. And then we'll continue to monitor, be vigilant throughout the day.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can we try Heather Marco again?
Hello, can you hear me now?
There you go.
Yes, we can.
Hey.
Hi, Heather.
Hi. I just have a question about how you're accommodating parents that have to work and cannot be home during the day to monitor their children. I am a single mom of a little guy that's going to be entered kindergarten this year, and I have to work. I'm the sole provider.
Miss Marco, this is the probably the part that I struggled the most, with everything that we're doing, because I understand the burden that we impose in our families, particularly in cases like you, where you need to work and you need coverage for the times that your child will be at home. We don't have solutions for that. We truly don't, and it's a part that if we had a solution, if we had a way of doing that, we certainly would. But none of the options that we have right now are the most optimal option, right? So unless we return to school full time, there will be impact to families, to students, to staff. So there's no easy answers for that. And unfortunately, right now at this moment in time, I don't have an answer for you, ma'am.
So if he can't participate in school on certain days, is that going to negatively affect him moving on to the next grade? I know kindergarten is not mandatory, but I was just wondering if that would affect him at all going to first grade next year, if he can only participate certain days.
Sure. So let me just kind of offer you some more information. Yeah, kindergarten is it does count, you know, and it's the first grade that we have the compulsory, you know, attendance yet, but it counts, you know, for promotion. Now, and I know a particular case, and if you want to talk offline, I can certainly talk to you about that as well. But it will be interesting to know what will be the conditions where your son or daughter will be during the day, those days that you have to work, and for the child not to be able to participate. Again, I don't need to know that information right now. It's private information. But if you want to, you know, interact with me offline, I'll certainly talk to you and try to understand better your situation.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you so much.
If you want to send me an email, we'll correspond or we'll talk on the phone.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
The next person is Stephanie Herman.
Hi, everyone. This was already kind of just brought up, but you know, I'm not going to touch upon the safety concerns because I know that was brought up several times through, you know, different staff and families and parents. So this is piggybacking off of what was just discussed. So, you know, I do have a real great concern as my kids missing curriculum. I have 2 kids who will be entering the 2nd grade. I myself work in a public school. I'm a speech language pathologist and most likely will be required to be in my building 5 days a week. My husband too will be required to attend his workplace 5 days a week. And for those days of virtual learning, my greatest concern is how am I going to ensure that, what can I do to ensure that my children are going to be able to access, you know, their meets with their teachers, their assignments, things like that, and not miss curriculum when they've already missed so much, you know, at the end of this past school year. I think I just have a real concern for that. And, you know, it sounds like it's kind of up to the parents at this point. It's in the parents' hands to figure this out. You know, I appreciate CHAPS working really hard to try to figure out, you know, what they can for childcare. So I greatly appreciate that. But, you know, I know I'm not the only family, you know, that has this concern. I know I'm not alone on this. So, you know, and I really do appreciate everything that the staff and, you know, the reopening committee have already been doing and has done for this. But I think this is a real concern as far as, you know, how do we make sure that our children, as they're moving up those grade levels, are not going to be missing out on so much more than they already have. You know, any type of feedback from you guys, staff, other parents and families regarding, you know, this concern and this issue would be greatly appreciated. You know, again, I thank everyone for working really hard, as I know that this process is not easy by any means. You know, there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of moving parts. But, you know, I think that's kind of another thing keeping me up at night is, you know, aside from all the safety protocols, is my kids missing out on those pieces of virtual learning and what ultimately, what can I do? So.
Right. No, it's a valid point. Besides CHAPS also, with Matt and with Steve Freitas, and he's trying to put together the best plan he can, because he also has limitations because of he's regulated by EEC, which is a whole different, you know, the early childhood, you know, they're just different. So there's some barriers there that prevents him from doing more that he could do so. I have been in touch with the president of the Boys and Girls Club to provide perhaps alternatives in the future. We're still kind of you know, maturing all that to understand what would be a type of offering that could be appealing to a number of families that allows the students to be engaged remotely during the school time when parents are at work. Sorry, but that's again, we're still in conversations about that, because there's no linear thinking on that. It's so convoluted, it's so difficult. There's so many different circumstances for parents that are very difficult. And being an educator yourself, you know how hard it is to, you know, to go back to work as well. You know, so it's a necessary piece, because if the children are not at least exposed to some learning in school, the remote learning is really not the best scenario for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you.
The next person is Elizabeth Mcnulty.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I just have two questions. One was already sort of touched upon by Julia a little bit earlier today. And when a student tests positive for the virus, what happens to that student, to the students in their classes, and to adults that have worked with that student? Mm-hmm. And then to add to that, what happens to any siblings of that student who test positive and the students in that siblings class?
Right. So very good question, but that's what the protocol states. So the protocol that we have in place by the CDC, it gives a step-by-step with each one of those scenarios. If it's one student positive, then the tracing becomes, are there siblings? Who else is in the household? Maybe the household has an adult that works in our schools as well. So there's so many ramifications to that. And each case scenario prompts a different type of action. Meaning that it could be a 14-day quarantine. It could be, everyone get tested, and the other ones who were exposed to the school were present in our schools. So there's a variety of steps that need to be taken for each one of the scenarios. So CDC has offered, off the top of my head right now, it's probably there are 6 or 7 different scenarios that anticipating if this is a condition, what are the step-by-step actions that we have to take. So our nurses have that, our principals have that. Again, we haven't lived that yet. The Board of Health is on board with us for any type of contact tracing. And for us internally, if we find that a student A has been diagnosed and tests positive, then we just have to retrace that student. And that's why it would be so important for students to be always in the same seat in the classroom, what schedule that child has. Does that child leave their cohort to go elsewhere for services? All those things will be our tracing steps to understand what the ramification for us internally. And also the Board of Health will do the external part, which is understanding what's the household and everybody else that is involved with that particular child.
Okay, thank you. The second question I have is, what specific benchmarks, like number of cases, community positivity rates, will trigger a return to remote learning?
So we don't have that information yet. That's forthcoming by the state. They're creating the metrics for that. So we'll have that soon. We know that the rate of transmission is something that has to be part of this equation. Thankfully, the rate of transmission in the Hudson is very low, 0 right now, and the communities around it's about 2% or less. So we are at least in the area that we don't have a lot of spikes or any kind of concerns at this point. To just the maintenance of understanding what the rate of transmission is at any given time. But like I said before, it could be right now we are in very good shape. It could be that 3 weeks from now we're going to be having a whole different conversation. So we'll take step by step, and hopefully soon we'll have a type of rubric of sorts that allows us to monitor more effectively any type of movement according to perhaps the number of cases or the activity in a particular school. If it's just a school, it's an entire district. So all those things are relevant to the big picture. So we'll hopefully to have that information soon.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go back to somebody that wasn't able to join earlier, Tiffany Burgess.
She put a note in the chat because she couldn't get on to being able to speak live.
Thank you. If she wants to type her question in, we can answer that too. So the next person will be Alex Hoyt.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. Somebody more or less already asked it. I was going to ask you, Dr. Rodriguez, about what public health metrics you're seeing that are encouraging you. You kind of just spoke to that, so I'm happy to pass, make sure other people get to talk.
Thank you.
The next person is Debbie Coviello.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. My question is about the HVAC evaluations that happened recently.
Sure.
I understand the reports are in, and I'm just wondering if all 6 of the schools met the criteria set forth by DESE on their checklist. If they didn't, I would love to hear what needs to be addressed in each building and the timeline for getting that done. You know, the more we learn about COVID transmission, the more important we see, especially indoor air quality is. So I think that's a real important piece for keeping students safe.
Sure. I don't believe all the reports are in yet. I know that we have received a couple. They are coming in installments. So once we have all the reports, I will debrief with Mr. Bailey and then show the school committee as well what the results of the reports are. But regardless of that, even before the report's been written, some recommendations have already been given by the engineer who toured each one of our buildings. For example, the upgrades of filters. Filters have already been ordered and will be hopefully in before sometime in the next couple of weeks, so we can replace all the filters. The filters going to be replaced more frequently throughout the year as in regular seasons. We know that some of the recommendations from the engineer too is also to optimize and maximize the airflow that the system provides. So they are going to be making, you know, different types of modifications, just a systemic kind of approach to get more air in, or whatever, you know, percentage of capacity of fresh air coming in. So these things have already been spoken, and we already taken action over that. And of course, the report may provide additional information for us that are both that we need to take. And of course, along the way, I'm sure there'll be costs associated with that, but that's part of what we need to do. So we'll be acting on all the recommendations by the firm that we hired as a consultant.
So will parents and staff be able to see the full reports, pieces of the reports? Not at all? How does that work?
No, I believe the report is going to be available.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no reason to. There's nothing to hide. It's more. It's the report is more the optimization of the system as opposed to. There's no air quality. You know, there are a lot of information coming. Things that we can do better or upgrade better for the airflow within the schools to be maximized and optimized. That's probably what we can see more in those reports. And of course, some of the potential things that can be added that are more specific and technical that we can probably, you know, upgrade a little bit. But the filtration, for example, is one of the things that we are, you know, putting the best filter that we can for the machines that we have.
Okay. And does that seem like it's all going to be able to be done by August 31st, the first day that staff will be in the buildings?
Yeah,
it's coming quick.
We're confident of that. These types of filters is not something that is something that takes a long to to arrive. So Mr. Bailey and his team have been on top of that since the visit from the engineer. So we should be all set.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The next person is Bob Wheeler.
Hi there. This is Bob and Wendy Wheeler. Our daughter is going into kindergarten this year, and we are leaning more towards having her stay at home 100% remote as our preference. And a couple questions that we have is seeing that she is in kindergarten and it's all about learning and how, you know, figuring out how to spell things and the idea of, you know, making sure she's writing her letters correctly and so forth. Will there be a way to show that work, meaning do we have to scan that work? Because it's a lot of writing for them, not so much doing things specifically on a computer. I mean, do we have to scan and upload the work? Are scanners going to be provided to families to do that?
Good question. So we anticipate that there will be groups of students that also, besides having technology at home, they're going to need the paper and products, right? So it's something that we're going to be, providing, for a number of students who, meet that criteria, perhaps your daughter. Just the one thing to keep in mind, and I understand your predicament there, and I honor whatever decision you make, but also kindergarten is such a formative year for social interaction, right? So it's such I know it's a difficult decision that you have to make, but the socialization, the social interaction in the classroom is also crucial for kindergartners. So something to keep in mind. But in terms of products, yes, there will be some students that are going to need the paper version of things to be able to to produce results at home.
So how do we get that to the teachers?
we're still evaluating how we're going to distribute that, and how you're going to make the exchange for that. I don't believe we're going to do scanning things. I think that's complicated. Not everybody has the technology to do that. So we're probably going to find a mechanism that we can either pick it up or be delivered, or we'll find ways of exchanging information.
Okay. One question that we had, it kind of goes back to basically your chain of if somebody does end up with COVID, and you're going to kind of do like a call tree. So if someone is quarantined for 14 days, a student, and they were in the hybrid original model, and they were in either A, B, or C, does that mean that they have to default to cohort D and now just do all their remote learning online?
That is correct. Yes. So anyone who needs to be excluded just because of either being quarantined or any other situation, it could be just quarantine for precaution, right? It doesn't even have to be positive, but just exposure. We will provide, supports for all those students who are going to be, learning from home for a period of time. It's temporary, but we're going to make sure that we help everybody.
So maybe the curriculum was not even started, or maybe it was done differently, and now they're going to have to go into a separate teacher an environment?
No, that's different. That's different. That student, by all means, will be excluded maybe for 14 days, will be returning to school. That student will maintain the same flow of learning that he or she was having while in cohort A, B, or C, right? Those who opt not to return to school fully, those are the ones that need a different mode of operation, right? That we will provide supports. But anyone who is engaged in the hybrid model, for example, either cohort A, B, or C, and need to be excluded for a temporary, a short period of time, we will continue to support those students remotely and continue to interact with the teachers and participate, virtually, and all those that we don't want to disrupt the flow. The exclusion it should not be a punishment. So we want to make sure that they are involved as much as they can if they're feeling well.
Okay, and then the question around the cohort D, if it's the full remote, are they going to have, like, for example, is their classroom time going to be like, say it's 8 to 3, just as a number? Mm-hmm. Will they have as they're working, is there literally a staff member that's sitting there at the computer waiting for the kids to raise their hand in the chat to say, I have a question, and that they're going to work with them, like literally one-on-one throughout the full scheduled day?
Well, it will that part we don't know yet. It will depend how many students per grade level we're talking about, right? It could be that all of a sudden we have a cohort of 15 kindergartners, for example, right? If that's the case, it's basically a classroom. So we have to make provision for those 15 kids to be together. What if it's just one? Right, so we need to modify the what is expected for that student also. So it's not just a singleton. I'm isolated and this person on the side here. So once we learn how many students are now returning per grade level, then we start defining what cohorts we can possibly have and how we're going to deploy personnel to support each one of these group of students per grade level. So that's the unknown piece yet, but we'll get there.
So I guess the other question is that this cohort D, is that going to be supported by Hudson teaching staff, or is that outsourced to Minnesota somewhere? I mean, is it our staffing that's going to, in our town, that's going to support them?
Our own staff, yes, our own staff.
Okay.
When you see in the plan that we talk about the third party thing, at the high school, some students, not all students, some students may benefit from having some online courses, and that's the third party, and they will work more independently, but all personnel working with the students are Hudson Public Schools personnel.
Okay. Did you have another question? Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. If the classroom, in all of the literature you guys provided, you said that you're going to keep students 3 feet apart. But the CDC guidelines is 6 feet. Why do you think 3 feet is okay?
No, it's not 3 feet. So 3 feet we could guarantee a 3 feet or more in every classroom if every student returned to school.
Okay.
Since we are opting for the hybrid model, which is basically half of the membership will come at any given time, we can guarantee 6 to 8 feet apart for each classroom, depending on the size of the classroom. Okay. So it will be at a minimum 6 feet apart.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Take care.
So, Dr. Rodriguez, Tiffany Burgess put her questions in the chat, so I'll read them to you.
Sure, please.
I appreciate everything that you are all doing. Thank you for everything. As parents, we gradually teach our children to go off on their own. So my question is why not have the kids in the high school do remote learning and use the high school for the younger children in elementary and middle school so you can ensure social distancing? And then her next question is, when are parents supposed to let the school district know that their child will be doing remote learning for the year?
Very good question. So I think the thinking is logical in terms of creating space. But even at the high school, not every high school student is an independent student, right? So we need to be mindful that we have always a variety of learners in our schools. So it doesn't matter. You can be a 12th grader and need a lot of support, right? And you can be a 9th grader or 8th grader also needing a lot of support. So for us, the primary component of not only social emotional learning, but the attainment of a good education is the exposure to the teachers. Nothing replaces the experience with our teachers, right? So, and the classroom exposure and the classroom learning. So in that fact, we must ensure that every single student will be partially in front of a teacher in a hybrid model. And hopefully at one point we get to a full return. Kathy, what's the second part of the question?
It was about when they're going to notify us about wanting to choose remote.
Oh, sure.
Remote academy.
Yes. So we are creating the system right now, the platform for parents to notify us. We hope that this is going to go out on Monday the 10th, if not sooner.
And the next person is Jennifer Keck.
Hi, Marco. It's Jennifer. Howard.
Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Can you hear me?
You're frozen.
I'm
You're
well,
frozen.
thank you. I've actually been listening, and I had different questions, but now Beth had asked about the benchmarks that had allowed us to move from either remote learning back to hybrid, or hybrid to remote, or hybrid to full learning. So what metrics were you to actually put us on this track for hybrid in the first place? Also, if we have students or teachers who are exposed, they might need to be quarantined for 14 days unless they have those tests. If it's a teacher who's been exposed, we're going to need more substitutes. I don't know that we're going to have an easy time getting substitutes coming into a classroom saying, hey, you're coming to replace the teacher who has just contracted a deadly disease. So that's a concern. And you mentioned monitoring, but a lot of the people who have this are actually asymptomatic. So we're going to be spread. Monitoring. And to have mandatory hand washing, which I think is a great idea. I know at least in my wing of the building at Quinn, there's a bathroom sink for girls. I believe there's one bathroom sink for boys. Haven't spent any time in there, so I'm not sure. On the upstairs wing, and then one more for boys and girls downstairs. So for 110, or if I guess we're doing hybrid 55 students, that's a lot of time waiting to go and use a sink to wash one's hands.
So Jennifer, I'm going to try to answer the best I can. Sometimes you broke down, but I think I understood all your questions. So the factors, the metrics associated with movement from one model to the next, we don't have that document yet. It's being created, right? So for us to have an understanding what's going to be our threshold per se of when to move from the hybrid perhaps to remote because the situation has worsened, or if there is an opportunity for us to leave the hybrid model and go into an in-person because things are much better, right? So those metrics are being devised right now. So we don't have all that yet. The metrics that gives us the opinion that we should go into a hybrid model is our capacity to bring half of our students back into school with a 6 feet or more of separation, and our ability to provide all or not only provide, but also reorganize our school environment that will allow all the mitigating factors as the wearing masks, the social distancing, the washing hands, and all these protocols, the organization of the classroom, the separation within the classroom allows us to maintain safe distance according to the guidelines that we know today. So we are accounting for that information with the fact that today Massachusetts has been now for the entire month of July on 2.1 or less percentage of transmission rate, which is very low compared to where we were before in different states. Again, this is today. This is what we know today. Hudson is in a very good situation. We have 0 transmission right now and 0 active cases for now 2 weeks in a row, which is also great. But we're not in a bubble, right? So all these things we understand that, and we rely on that information to say if we put all these pieces into place, we can mitigate the fact that we can bring staff and bring students in a safe manner into our schools, but knowing that there is the potential of someone being exposed because I went to a weekend party in grandma's house in New Hampshire. I don't know, right? So you come back and all of a sudden, like you said, there's some folks are asymptomatic. We don't know those things, and we are exposed to those things at every location that when we leave our homes or invite anyone to come inside our homes, right? So all that are the risk factors. There's no way of anticipating that, but what we have to be is reactive about if a case appears, right? And that's why the protocols that the CDC has prepared for us is very detailed about who does what and when and for how long, and knowing that, then again we have to trace, right? So how many people in a particular building or cohort or classroom were exposed, and depending on what that is, have the protocols for that. And also knowing that if there is such a situation, there has to be it's something that the state is working on for us yet. We don't have answers on that yet, but working on how fast can individuals, students and teachers can be tested and how fast the results can return for us to understand what we're up against, right? So not only understanding the monitoring and identifying a case, but also how quick the return is to understanding if the test is positive or negative. So those are the things that we're going to be, again, crossing that bridge when we get there, because we still, again, we haven't lived the situation yet. It's very complex, but we are putting almost every mechanism in place to ensure that when it happens, we are prepared and will take every action possible according to the regulations and according to the steps that have been given to us by the health authorities.
Okay, and about the hand washing, if we have, let's say, half of our students of cohort A and a cohort B, which would be about 55 students, perhaps less because some are going to elect not to come. We have, I assume, 2 sinks, one for girls, one for boys in the upstairs wing, at least at Quinn. If you're taking half of kids, so 27 kids, and having them wash their hands for 30 seconds at a time, you're looking at almost 15 minutes of, just waiting to wash hands. Right. And that's with them social distancing. I guess we are going to have to come up with flow charts and maps, and that's a lot of time, especially if we're going to have them do that frequently. Yeah, so that's the principals have been working on what bathroom visits and things will look like, and access to facilities that make sure that hand washing is because hand washing is our best bet. Hand sanitizers will be available, but that's not as effective as the hand washing. So we're going to have both scenarios going on. When we can not do the hand washing, we're actually going to use the hand sanitizer. But we know that like I said before, school is going to look different and feel different for when we return. Not only how we compose our classrooms, how we organize things, but also the fact that time will be spent in morning routines, dismissal routines, bathroom trips, cafeterias. Everything is going to be kind of consuming bits of time. So for me, our biggest concern too is how much we can maximize a routine so we don't waste a lot of instructional time on those routines, but at the same time make sure the routines are complete enough for us to feel that we are maintaining doing the mitigation process that we need to do to make sure that the place is as safe as possible. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Jennifer.
Next is Colleen Garofalo.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak tonight. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So I had a few questions. My first question is, what plans are in place to address when administrators have to quarantine or have to be out for extended periods of time due to infection? I know it's going to be a challenge to get substitutes for teachers, but what happens when we're losing administrators?
Well, they can't be sick, period. They're going to have to do something special. No, it's a valid question. So we are working as a team. At any given time, if there is any administrator who needs to be quarantined, the team's going to have to join forces and cover for that individual. So that's going to be a priority for us to make sure that the buildings are always safe and certainly with the proper staffing and administrators. So if anyone encounters themselves in that situation, anyone, including myself, has to step in.
Okay. And then my second question has to do with students on IEPs and 504s who are entitled to levels of confidentiality. If students are tuning in to live instruction from the classroom, how is it that those students' privacy and confidentiality is going to be preserved?
So think of if a student receives special education services in the classroom with a teacher or paraprofessional, so the other students are accustomed to seeing another adult working with that child. I think the confidentiality piece is more like of our understanding that students receive services, whether it's through a 504, through an IEP, and those services will continue to be provided at all times, even remotely. So there will be times where the special education teacher or maybe the paraprofessional will do small group sessions or private sessions with the student remotely, depending on the circumstances. So there will be a variety of ways in which the special education personnel will be actively involved with the students. But in terms of confidentiality, is the knowledge and the fact that everyone in the classroom, kind of already knows that the student receives services. They don't have to know what the services are, but there's also an adult involved in working with them. So, and for the families who may be watching, a session, for example, in the elementary level more so. That's why we have asked parents to sign off on that agreement where everything that happens video-wise cannot be recorded and not something that we talk or broadcast. The honor system has to be there, but parents will continue to be have to sign some authorization that no recording and no discussions to third parties should occur, any situation within the classroom.
Okay. If some of our special ed students or English language learners choose cohort D, and then we also have students in cohorts A, B, and C who will need SPED services, do you anticipate that we're going to have enough staff and that those staff will have enough time in their schedule to meet needs at all these varying levels?
Yes, very good question. So I anticipate there will be a number of special education students in the D group. More so students perhaps who have a more fragile health profile, in addition to having some special needs that perhaps will not return to school. So we need to support them accordingly, and we'll make sure that they receive the services that they need. Once we know how many students and who they are, what type of services that they need to receive, that's when we're going to see where our resources are to be able to support them. There'll be times that doesn't necessarily mean that the current teacher, the current special education teacher or the ESL teacher are the teachers who are actually going to be supporting them. It might be somebody else. So, and those are the things that are yet to be defined, and we will only know that when we know exactly how many students are not returning because of that situation.
Okay. I just have one last question. It kind of goes back to the hand washing. Especially, I guess, as an elementary teacher, when the students are a little younger and just need a lot more adult support for routines. I heard you say, like, we're going to be committed to teaching the full curriculum, but I also heard you say that this hand washing and routine enforcement is going to take up instructional time with mask breaks and mitigating social distancing? And do you see it feasible that teachers are going to be able to cover the same amount of curriculum, especially who teach, K1, 2?
So you're right. So K1 and 2 primarily will be a lot of not all hand washing, but hand holding, right? Because that's going to be a whole different routine and learning environment for them as well. In addition to learning everything else that a K1 and 2 grade would expose a student, regularly. The curriculum directors have been working on that particular piece, because we understand that the time on learning is going to be diminished as a result of all these processes and protocols that are going to be in place. So we are going to do our best to map out what needs to be covered to the maximum extent that we possibly can, understanding that the routines may take a slice of the teaching time.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Next is Colin Parham.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. I just want to say thank you in advance for letting me speak tonight. I'm here to speak from the heart. I've written this statement and again, appreciate the time to say this. The hybrid model does not in any way help to protect the health of our children and teachers, and it obviously increases the risk of COVID-19 transmission. We drive past restaurants every day, and we see that most, if not all, of the patrons are sitting outside. Inside dining rooms remain scarcely populated, and for good reason. I am not comfortable taking the risk of dining inside, and I do not subject my family to that risk. By your own admission, Dr. Rodriguez, our schools cannot safely seat our children and teachers simultaneously at normal capacity while meeting CDC guidelines.
Right.
Our schools should not be opened until a safe and fully tested vaccine has been made available. This is literally the only way to truly protect our children, our teachers, and our community. We are asking our teachers to maintain in-person and remote students simultaneously. But have we really and truly fully considered the additional burden this is going to place on our teachers and the impact it will have on children with disabilities who thrive on set daily routines? Children with ADHD, for example, that may not be on an IEP and consistently struggle with remote learning. It's obvious from a political point of view that picking the hybrid model made sense for the administration. But in the interest of protecting our children and teachers to the utmost of our ability, the hybrid model, in my opinion, is the wrong choice. I thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and I welcome any comments that you may have.
Sure. So that's why I think I share your sentiment in terms of that's not a perfect scenario for us to return, but mitigating everything that we know today, it's probably the one that makes most sense to us, meaning that particularly because what you said, our students with disabilities, our English learners, the more vulnerable students are really at a greater deficit for learning than anybody else. That's why we're creating the cohort C, primarily for students with disabilities and English learners and other students, for example, those who are homeless or in foster care and those who need a more consistent routine in their lives. They'll come to school 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Wednesday, the only day they will do remotely with everybody else, is particularly for that. I think that it's insurmountable the amount of loss that one would have if you're already if you're a student who have high needs. And for us, not returning to school will just set back those students even further. Even though we can say that we can provide services remotely, it's not the same as the face-to-face. So trying to get into schools 4 days a week, the most students we can have, knowing that we are providing for those who have the highest amount of need, the opportunity to level the field, if I want to call that, to the best of our ability to allow them to be successful and not to regress much. That's our intent. I think it's, I don't agree with you that that's political driven. It is really our effort to find the best way to bring the most students we can to our schools in a safe environment, a controlled environment, not perfect, not optimal. We cannot guarantee 100% of anything. I would be lying to you if I said so. And I'll also be lying to you to say that we're not going to have a COVID case in our schools and that we're going to have to kind of go through that process. But considering everything, the loss that can happen for education and social emotional learning for our students, it behooves us to have some type of return that have the physical contact with peers and teachers, because that's the optimal learning, and I know that's the learning that's missed the most, and be able to hopefully gradually going to, hopefully we have a vaccine soon that will be able to start, returning to a more steady routine where students can be in our schools every day. So thank you for your comments.
I thank you for yours too. I don't think we'll ever really fully agree. I think the best way to protect is to not expose, but I do understand your point of view. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next is Maya Levine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maya Levine, and I'm a resident of Hudson and an HHS alum. I just have a comment tonight, so just something to deeply consider. First, I appreciate the work you all are dedicating to crafting plans for the school year. I can't even imagine how hard this task is, so thank you. You may recognize my name as I sent an email to the individual school committee members and superintendent with a letter co-written by other alumni and myself that was signed by over 30 community members about concerns for reopening and virtual learning. Ultimately, the letter suggested that HPS commits to a remote learning model. This is because the situation is life or death. The situation is life or death. One more time, the situation is life or death. Can you imagine setting your child, staff member, or community member up against death? A community in Indiana did. Just a few days ago at a school district in Indiana, at least one student and one school staff member tested positive for the virus days after reopening. The student tested positive after the first day of school. It is inevitable, like we have all learned, that HPS will contract a case if we reopen, which means we will have to immediately and uncomfortably transition to remote learning, just like we did in March. At that point, all of the time and energy dedicated by the faculty, including yourselves in the school committee and superintendent positions, to crafting reopening plans will be wasted. They would then have to abruptly change all of their plans to adapt to a remote learning model when they could have been preparing for a smooth start to remote learning if they received the official plan earlier. If HPS decides to reopen, there are students and teachers that I know strongly considering their withdrawals from the district. Does HPS really need more enrollment and hiring problems right now? I strongly believe that the health and safety of anyone connected to HPS, which includes students, faculty, their families, and anyone else they interact with in the public, is best preserved with a remote learning model. Please, for the sake of my brother who is a student at HHS, my community at HHS that I care deeply about, and the entire HPS district, I beg that you don't reopen, or else the blood will be on your hands. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Aline Kalechian.
Hello. I have a statement, so I'll read that. And thank you for giving us the time to be able to do this.
Thank you.
So, hello. My name is Aline Kalechian. I graduated from Hudson High School this year, and I have a younger sister who will be a junior at HHS. I have a few points I want to bring to your attention. First, what are the district's plans for if a student, teacher, or beloved community member becomes violently ill and or passes away due to contracting the virus because we're forced to go back to school? Furthermore, why would the district desire to reopen, knowing that this could happen and knowing that immense trauma will follow? Fortunately, this trauma is avoidable if HPS decides to go remote for the fall. Related to this, I know that if I was still a student at HHS, like my sister, I would not be able to focus on my work if we were forced to go back to school. Instead, I would constantly think about whether my peers or myself will get sick, no matter what measures are in place. As someone with generalized anxiety disorder, I can confidently say that focusing on schoolwork goes out the window when my anxiety reaches such high levels. Anxiety consumes the mind. Students with similar mental health conditions like mine will not have a productive fall. Does physically attending school matter more than preserving student mental health? With that said, this leads me to my next point. It's important to consider that going fully remote puts students with difficult and unhealthy home lives at risk.
they will also not be able to have a productive fall. However, if the district decides to go remote now, that gives the school committee a month to identify those students and plan ways to support them on a case-by-case basis. I hope that the school committee truly considers these questions and concerns when deciding what to do for the fall. If not, know that you will be at fault for creating long-lasting trauma in our community.
Thank you.
Next is Erin Morrow.
Hi, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak again. So I have a few questions. Some of these I've kind of jotted down as I've gone on because other things have been kind of covered. But the first thing that I wanted to ask, Marco, I know at the beginning you had mentioned that the district was going to be posting the full results of the parent and teacher surveys and updating that document on the website. Is that correct?
Yes, the survey had a number of questions. So
right.
Yeah, we took those questions. They're going to become FAQ document.
Okay.
Yes.
My question is, has the school committee already seen the full results of that survey and it's just not been published on the website for us yet? Or have they not seen the full results of the survey yet either?
So the full result, the results that we present to the school committee is the results that we're making published, right? So the full report is not going to be available to anybody but the administration because it contains personal information. So because we asked, staff and parents to identify themselves when they're doing that, so we're not publishing the whole thing.
I'm not talking about the personally identifiable information. I'm speaking specifically to the question. So I guess to follow up on this, I think the results as the reason I'm asking this, especially for the benefit of the school committee members, is I believe that the results as they are published now are incredibly misleading. The question that is presented in question, in terms of my family's life circumstances and specific situation, the most ideal form school could take in the fall would be blah, 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 is at the top of the page. But conspicuously missing, in my opinion, is the follow-up question that appeared right below that on the survey that says, how confident are you in that answer? As someone had said earlier, the way that that question is worded, like I know very specific, the way that the survey results are published right now, the way that it is presented makes it appear that the majority of families in Hudson would prefer for school to fully return in person, and I just don't know that that's the case. I would love to know what the confidence level was within that specific cohort of the people that said to fully return, because I know for myself, I had mentioned this on the school committee call last week, my husband and I both work full-time jobs. Obviously, the most ideal scenario for us would be that the kids would go back to school full-time. My confidence level that I put on there was level 1, and if there had been a 0, it would have been a 0, because I have absolutely no confidence in that answer. But the way that the question was worded, I want to make sure that the school committee understands if they're kind of looking to those surveys to help inform their decision about the way that they vote on Thursday, the way that those results have been published is not, I think it would be cast in a very different light.
So let me elaborate on that a little bit. If I recall, I don't have the form in front of me, but I think if you look at the form that we presented to the school committee, under the chart that says, what's your preference returning to school, then underneath we put there all the respondents in 4 and 5 on the Likert scale. So that's we put in there for what the percentage of people who felt that their position at that point in time would hold true. I think it's there, if I'm not mistaken. The second thing is that, I think we had about 900, I'm trying to remember the numbers now, but about 900 family respondents, right? We have approximately 1,600 or more families that we believe in Hudson. So basically almost 50% of the respondents, respond to the survey. So 50% of the parents. Out of the 50%, there's probably about 50% who said they would favor an in-person or hybrid. So it's not the totality of the families. We are looking at that information to guide as one of data points that we use to gauge what is the perception out there. And again, it's a survey. It's not the full, blown, kind of indicator that we say because of this we're choosing this model. Is a variety of things, but that was one type of information that we use to understand where we are in terms of family perception at this point in time. Maybe 2 weeks from now the survey could be totally different, right? But we have to recognize that. But it's one data point that we looked at to inform our opinion.
Okay, I mean, I'm going to have to go back and look at the packet again, because I did not notice that it was a 4 or 5 confidence level, and that was the way that those numbers had been presented. I'm
almost positive it's there. I'm almost positive.
Okay.
It's underneath the graph, I think.
Okay, I'll take a look at that.
Okay.
The other thing that you had mentioned earlier was that students if in a hybrid model, students in cohort D, so anyone who chooses to send their children to remote for the year or whatever the time. So they would be not with the classroom teacher that they would normally have been assigned to, but they will actually be with a different teacher. But then if you have a cohort or a number of students in a cohort that is then quarantined, they wouldn't go to cohort D, they would stay with their cohort. So if they can, even just for those 2 weeks, receive instruction from their same teacher in cohort A and B, why do the kids who opt to be in cohort D not, like, why, if the reasoning behind having the children in cohort D with a teacher who is not the classroom teacher, then I guess I'm not understanding if they're not going to be able to get the same instruction during those 2 weeks, but how that's exactly going to work.
All right, so I think I know what you're saying. So the cohort D, we don't know if they're going to be temporarily remote, fully remote, or going to be for the year, right? That's unknown, because we don't. First of all, we don't know how many students are in the category, right? And then second, we don't know how long, because they can always transition back if they want to, right? That's not a problem. So, but of course, there'll be a way of transitioning back into a different cohort. I think my point about if a student is forced to be excluded because of quarantine, right? Either 10 days, 14 days, whatever the modality there, it would be the best interest for those students not to lose track of what the classroom is actually working on. So we will work with that student, the teacher, and we will work with that student so the student does not, fall behind in the sequence or the work that's being done. The cohort D, because there's so many unknowns, we don't know if it's going to be 3 students, 15 students, and what's going to be the destination of where they're going to be, because they may be a cohort of their own. And knowing that we might have some personnel that might be working remotely, we also need those people to have a destination for jobs. So it may be that we get a group of students with a teacher who's working remotely and pair that group to become the cohort. So again, these are all the pieces that are missing still. We still don't know how many teachers cannot return because they have personal circumstances that prevent them from returning to school, and then how we're going to maneuver around accommodating those teachers. And then that piece is missing because we're yet to get that information, and how many students are going to be in the cohort D. So once we start knowing this, we start forming the picture. What's the best way of pairing up personnel and the students who are going to be serviced remotely? Knowing that a student, who are going to be in a cohort D, it could be a student with disabilities with a lot of services, right? So that student's going to continue to see a teacher regularly, plus the content teachers and all the support systems that are in place. So it's almost going to be, once we know who those students are, will be what types of individualized learning has to happen for a particular student, or how can we maximize cohorts to be able to also maximize staffing that's available to us. So that's the unknown part. So we have a model, we just don't know the numbers yet to form how the model is going to be working together between the resources that we have, meaning the teachers and support staff, and of course the number of students that need to be in that cohort D.
Okay. I know so this just relates to the self-certification and kind of health screening. So I had brought this up last Tuesday, and I believe Ms. Ryan had brought it up later during the school committee meeting about, folks sending their kids still, with a fever or, other symptoms or whatever, or, are there, I know you had said, the parents obviously will do the first screening and then there will be kind of periodic check-ins. Like what kind of, are people that are entering the building, educators, staff, visitors, going to be required to self-certify before entering, or is there going to be some kind of an on-site health screening? To be frank with you, I was disappointed at the dismissive attitude towards that question during the meeting last week. I believe you had made a comment about the list of symptoms and how nearly everyone probably has at least one of these on a daily basis. If that is the case, every doctor's office requires patients to complete a health survey the morning of the visit. The dentist requires this. Employers across the state and the country require that employees complete a self-certification. If that was truly, unnecessary and overkill, why would people be doing that? And why are the schools any different?
Sure. I apologize if you felt that was dismissive. I think my point there was the fact that all those symptoms exist in a variety of ways and doesn't mean necessarily the person has COVID, right? Is positive. So that's, I think, my intent to say that it's so broad, the list of symptoms, that the nurse is going to have to really look very close and hard. And then we're still waiting for it to see if there'll be additional guidance from CDC about, are there clusters of symptoms that will then trigger something else, right? So I think that's a priority for us. Now, in terms of your question for visitors, if a visitor is coming to the building, is because there's a necessity of that person entering the building, or because we have invited the person to come in. And if that person comes in, there will be a questionnaire that the person will have to complete. That person is going to have to provide address and phone numbers, because we need to be able to trace the person, right? Whether the person was exposed or the person might be the person who transmitted. So we, in terms of the tracing process, every one entering our buildings will have to follow that questionnaire. But like I said before, even parents are going to come in by invitation only, and if there's a necessity for the parent to come in. Other than that, no adult or child or young people who does not belong in the building will be entering the building whatsoever. So we're going to be very, very judicious about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then has there been any kind of survey, or has the number of subs that are going to be willing to participate in schools here in Hudson kind of been quantified at all? I know that when the Mulready flu outbreak, there was a period of time where subs would not even go to the school, and that was just the flu. So I'm interested to see, if there's been any kind of quantifiable numbers related to sub availability.
Yes, I don't know the numbers right now, but we already surveyed all the subs who had received a letter of assurance to return last year. That they received last in June to return this year. A number of them have already notified that they're not returning. We have already begun the selection process for new ones who are interested in the job. The job is constantly posted. We don't close that position; is always open, and any candidate is being interviewed, regularly as they apply. So we are engaged in that process as much as we can, because we can expect that will be needed. Another thing that I am waiting for some data, I might get this by the end of this week or next week, is how many teachers won't be able to return. That's also make our plans, take a different direction in terms of how many teachers are returning, what type of coverage do we need, and how many of those teachers can actually be working from home, in what capacity, and how can we mitigate the two. So all those things are steps that yet to be taken with the information that you're missing.
So if, I guess, a very important data point about, the number of teachers that are going to be available and the number of parents or families who are going to be choosing to have their kids do remote for the year, wouldn't those two pieces of information kind of be critical to deciding whether it's a hybrid or a fully remote year?
Not necessarily, unless there's a huge amount in both sides.
But you don't know what the numbers are right now, though. They're completely unknown.
No, I don't. They're completely unknown at this time. Yes. So once we know those two pieces of information, we'll be able to define what's going to be next steps.
Okay, and the last question that I had was, this has been asked a couple times, but I'm just not sure I understand the answer, or I want to make sure that I understand. So I understand the triggers for moving the entire district back from, hybrid, either forward to fully in school or back to, fully remote are going to be, we're waiting on guidance from the state. Fine. You had mentioned before, I think a couple other people have asked about this. What happens when a student in a classroom tests positive? And I'm not talking about this from a contact tracing perspective. I know that the CDC has not issued specific guidelines about the number of people or the cohort or the class or the grade. I'd like to understand if the district has thought about that and at least has some kind of tentative plan of what exactly that would look like and who would be required to quarantine in the event that a student is testing positive, or a teacher, anyone.
Sure, no, absolutely. But we already have that guidance from CDC, right? So that guidance is already in place, the steps that we need to take. Now, it depends is that one teacher and 5 students that were exposed, quote unquote, is that 3-4 cohorts, the entire school. So each one of these pieces will dictate what's going to be the next level for us, meaning that we have to work in conjunction with the Board of Health to determine what's the best scenario there. We have guidelines, but until we are confronted with what is the exact scenario, how many people are involved, and what's the intensity of the connection tracing, and if it's outside, inside, just the school related, or more people within the community. So all that's going to be defined as we go along. So we don't have, unless we have the scenario and understand the ramifications of any type of a transmission, only then we'll be able to kind of define what's the next step in terms of closing a whole classroom, closing a whole school. All of a sudden is a district-wide piece. That's why looking at data basically on a daily basis and weekly basis to understand what is our level of any type of activity, where the students are being not even the quarantine, but students who have gone to the nurse's office and they are being isolated for a little while until understand better what it is, and testing being kind of returned the results. All these things are going to be one step at a time, because we need to live in the scenario and the magnitude of the scenario before we say we have to close a classroom, we have to close a school, we have to close the district.
Yep, understood. I guess what I'm saying is, if day 2 of the hybrid model, you have one student in one classroom that you find out is positive, what happens to that class, that cohort, what I'm trying to understand is, I understand like there's a million different scenarios, and obviously will escalate into the entire district being shut down if Hudson itself, but there must be some kind of an idea of when a positive case comes in, this is what we're going to do. We're going to shut down the 4 students around them. We're going to shut down their classroom. We're going to shut down their grade. What does that look like? Okay.
So I encourage you to, there is a link on a document, on the master plan, that is the DESE and the DPH guidelines. And that's the CDC guidelines. So those scenarios are all there. And each scenario tells exactly what the steps that need to be taken. I don't have the document in front of me to tell you right now, but if you go there, you can read that. You see step by step of what will be the conditions. If for a student, and like you said, there's a teacher and 4 students, what happened to the 4 students, what happened to the teacher. So all that is prescribed there in that guidelines.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Next is Stephanie McClary.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak, and also thank you to all the stakeholders who are working on the reopening plan. My name is Stephanie McClary, and I'm the parent of 2 students at Farley Elementary School. I think we can all agree that the health and safety of our children, faculty, staff, and ultimately our community is of the utmost importance and rightfully should be the focus of all school reopening discussions. However, in my life and work experience, most decisions are contingent upon money availability. So the focus of my questions will be fiscally related. According to cost estimates jointly published by the Association of School Business Officials International and the School Superintendents Association, the additional expenses to reopen an average size school district under COVID-19 conditions are estimated to be about $1.7 million. And that amount assumes planned expenses. There will undoubtedly be unforeseen costs like cleaning of buildings, equipment, and buses related to positive cases, purchase of more PPE, and paying for substitute teachers in case of teacher illness. In review of past school committee meetings, it was noted that a large amount of PPE has already been secured, which is great. But past meetings have also been witness to a recent 2% budget cut for the upcoming fiscal year and mention of financial obstacles such as lack of funding for air conditioning in the high school. I have two questions. I am aware of the recent announcement for additional funding through Chapter 70. Are you confident that that monetary allocation will support the district's needs? And if not, can you identify financial resources from which money will be available to cover COVID-19 related costs throughout the school year? And secondly, in knowing that some costs will be incurred regardless of timeliness of opening, has there been a cost-benefit analysis conducted to evaluate any potential cost savings for a remote opening versus the other opening plans? Thank you for your time.
Sure. So, so the announcement for the Chapter 70 money, that is just supposedly will be the money that we can depend on, has no effect in Hudson. Hudson's going to be a held harmless kind of approach. So the impact to our budget is just a few $1,000s. So does not impact Hudson. Other communities have benefited from more funding. Other communities actually have some more deficit that are more significant. So, but Hudson is basically held harmless. So we are not in that position right now. In terms of additional money that we have received, so to your point, we had already secured a number of equipment and PPEs last year with FY20 money. So therefore, we already kind of utilize some of the expenses, some of the revenue that we had last year, be able to kind of plan for this year. So we are a little ahead of the curve. So far, we have received through the CARES Act money, we have received $250,000, and then through the ESS ER money, we have received about $580,000. I am expecting, according to the commissioner, on Monday, we should be getting additional stimulus funds from the federal government coming up in the next few weeks. They are anticipating that money is going to be exponentially higher than any other money that we have received so far through ESSER or through CARES Act. So we are anticipating that we may have some more fundings coming up in terms of our ability to maintain the costs associated with COVID-19, and also those costs that are associated with perhaps utilities, because as we make some adjustments to our ventilation system and HVAC in our schools, will decrease the efficiency of those systems. Therefore, there'll be more utility costs associated with that in the long run. So we know that those things are coming our way. So we are, like I said, we have already $700,000, almost $800,000 from COVID funds, and we're expected to receive more in the coming weeks. We don't know how much that is, but once we know, we'll be able to plan accordingly. And in terms of your second question, we continue to look at the potential expenditures as I related earlier this evening. We are contemplating on hiring another technology person to support technology. We are hiring 3 nurses to support our 3 elementary schools because we need 2 nurses per site. And I'm sure there'll be all the costs associated with COVID that are yet to come that we have not planned or know yet. So we are preparing for that. Also the unknown part for us, even though we have already a 2% cut on the budget associated with the reduction of town appropriation this past June through the town meeting. We are expecting, we don't know what to expect in November when another town meeting will happen, if there will be further cuts there. because the state budget has not been released. Now they have projected a budget for 3 months through October. So right now we'll continue to have a lot of unknowns associated. What's the budget going to really look like for town aid? We already know what the Chapter 70 is, but we don't know yet exactly what the town aid will look like. And based on that, I still don't know how much of that revenue may or may not support the town of Hudson in appropriate ways, even more stimulus funds to kind of offset some of the setbacks in terms of of revenue. But also we don't know if the town will then have to make additional cuts to our town appropriation, and therefore projecting even further cuts beyond the 2% that we have already realized. So all those things are unknown right now. So the COVID-19 expenses are real. We continue to monitor that. We're expecting, hopefully there'll be good news about the next iteration of stimulus money that will come out of the federal government in the next couple of weeks. And then again, we're going to be monitoring this like everybody else is on a monthly basis, month-to-month basis, because it's the budget's not set yet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Rodriguez, there's a question in the chat about whether or not we're still on track for a hard stop at 9 o'clock. And if so, will there be a subsequent meeting scheduled to get to the rest of the participants? We have 13 people left on the list.
Okay.
9 of them are staff that, could potentially also get some questions answered in their building meetings, but I didn't know what you wanted to say about the hard stop at 9.
So thank you for the information. So why don't we get to all the participants minus the teachers, and let's see where we get until 9 o'clock. I really would like to have a hard stop close to the to the 9 o'clock. But if we again have to go a few minutes just to accommodate those who are not teaching staff. Also, let's remind everybody that next week all the principals are going to be holding their parent forums for their particular schools, where they will be able to also provide a variety of information that's pertinent to their school. Some are generalized. Some of the information is for everybody. I will be in those meetings as well. Most members of the task force will be there as well. So we certainly can have all these questions answered at a later date, because we're going to have 5 more meetings to go next week. So if we could at least guarantee right now that we can take care of all the participants, and then we can take care of the teachers at a later date.
So next is Kelly Mazza.
Hi, I just want to thank you for holding this so that we can ask our questions. And I do just want to mention that I believe a lot of the teachers on here are also parents in district. So, I think it's important that they're able to ask their questions as parents and not necessarily as teachers too. All right, so I just wanted to start with a couple of comments. A lot of my questions were answered, but I do still have some questions. So a couple comments. You stated that we will have cases in the school. And I think given that statement right there, and we all know that that is going to be true, we can't say that school is going to be safe for our teachers or for our students. I also find it really concerning that we're talking about opening schools when the state still hasn't released any metrics for what are the metrics for when we should be remote versus when we should be hybrid. If we start hybrid, when should we go to remote? That hasn't even been released, and we're talking about putting our kids into these buildings. We're not meeting for these meetings together, but yet we're talking about putting our teachers and students into our buildings in another month. The other piece with the social emotional learning, and I'm a huge proponent of social emotional learning, but when you look at all of the requirements and guidelines for in-person learning, and you factor in all the safety and distancing and sanitizing, there's really nothing personal about in-person teaching under all of these guidelines. And when you factor in the safety piece, is it really worth the risk? When you look at how restrictive the in-person teaching model is with the guidelines, is the risk worth it? Are they really going to get anything more in person than they could get remotely if the teachers were focusing just on remote? And I can say this, being a teacher in another district, what teachers are being asked to do with a hybrid model, you know, the best of teachers, people who are veteran teachers who've been doing this for a long time, are going to struggle with it. And I just have a really hard time believing that. I don't care if you're a super teacher, you're going to have a hard time with this hybrid model. It's asking way too much of people. And then on top of managing cohort A and cohort B, we're going to have excess absences. And how are the teachers going to manage these excess absences when kids are out 14 days quarantining, and they have cohort A that they're worrying about, and they have cohort B at home that they're providing work for? It's not sustainable, and it's really not manageable. So I just wanted to kind of throw out those. And then I have some questions. In terms of exposure, so if a child is exposed at school, and they're supposed to, according to the guidelines, wait 4 to 5 days before they even get tested. Are we managing or tracking that so that we don't have families that wait a day or 2 days, test their kids, get a false negative because they tested too soon, and then try to send them back to school? So I just wanted to ask about how we're managing making sure that families aren't testing too soon and getting false negatives and sending kids back to school.
So once there is any suspicion of COVID activity, we're going to be reporting that to the Department of Public Health, and they are the ones who are going to be doing the tracing. So we will be in conjunction with them, but they are the ones going to be assisting families in even location for testing. Not everybody knows where they are, right? So make sure that they do it in the proper way and get the results and have the parameters in place of when it's safe to return to school.
Okay. And then if my child is exposed, so I have a 6th grader, he'll be at Quinn, and realistically, if I wait the 4 to 5 days to get him tested, and then the testing result lapses are pretty long right now, he's going to be out for at least 7 to 10 days. Is there a plan in place for the teachers to have some support with these excessive absences that are going to be constantly happening? I just don't see how teachers can manage their cohorts and manage these excessive absences at the same time. So if my child's out for 7, 10, 14 days, however long he's out, what exactly is the plan for how he'll be able to stay on track and get support?
So as I said before, we have never lived this life before, right? So therefore, we don't know how many students are going to be out at the same time. We don't know how many students will be in that situation at any given time, per school, per classroom. So we are prepared to deploy whatever teaching staff and support staff to support everybody. So in this case, it's going to be literally on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, what the needs of the students are, and we'll deploy whatever is necessary to support them, remotely if necessary. So there's no set. I mean, we have plans, we have routines, but until it happens, it's going to be all hands on deck and understanding how do we support our teachers in making sure that the students who are just kind of leave because of different situations are also supported. So it's going to be basically a building effort to ensure that every child is taken care of.
Okay. And then I know that you've talked a lot about the cohort D for families who choose remote.
Yes.
And I'm still a little unclear. Will those students be getting synchronous sessions? Will they get synchronous learning for cohort D?
It will be a combination of. It won't be every day like everybody else, like in cohort A and B. They do every day. They will have synchronous. It will be a combination of things. It will be some students, like I said, in the upper grades might have some classes that they can take online. So there will be a combination of portfolio for them, to interact, but does not necessarily guarantee the same level of synchronous exposure that the students in cohort A and B are experiencing.
Okay, and then with the hybrid, so let's say my son is there on Monday and Tuesday. Thursday, Friday, will that be synchronous or asynchronous? I was unclear on that.
Both. So every day, when your child is home, there will be an opportunity for him to interact with the teacher, and there will be asynchronous, information that will be, pre-recorded and given to the parents, and there will be opportunity for also for the teacher to interact with the kids live. So there'll be a combination of those.
I don't know if I'm frozen or you're frozen.
I can hear you. You're frozen, but I can hear you.
Okay. And then for the hybrid model, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but from what I understand, if we have to go remote, and everyone's remote and the kids are at home, from what I understand, the teachers are still going to be expected to come into the building and teach from the building. So my question would be, why, with this already being as stressful as it is for teachers, why add the stress of having them come in and having them exposed rather than being able to teach in a less stressful environment where, you know, if they're less stressed out, they're going to be able to do a better job teaching, or at least give people the option. But why require them to come in and add that stress to them and add that exposure to them if it's not safe for the students to be in the building?
So I think I have there's two different things I'm thinking to answer your question. So if the governor closes schools and no one goes into our schools, that's everybody stays remote. If the choice to go remote is the district's choice, then the buildings are safe because teachers are not going to be, you know, in with the students. They'll just be teachers in their classrooms teaching remotely. Also gives us an opportunity to allow all the support staff to interact with teachers in support of the students at home. The remote learning component only is way more difficult and challenging in providing support service for students than if we were in the hybrid model. So therefore, we need to make sure that if we ever go to that model, it will be a time where the adults can be more interactive with each other in the building. They all have their classrooms to be in. But also the ability for them to work with the paraprofessionals and others in support of the students. So that's why they will be, you know, required to be in the building.
I think a lot of that could be done like we're doing right now. So I just think that is something that hopefully can be reconsidered. Considering how stressful the school year is going to be for teachers, anything that we can do to make it less stressful for them, I think is really important. And then just my last point was, if the school committee does vote hybrid, it would be really, really helpful to families if we could get those cohorts out sooner rather than later, because there's going to have to be a lot of families kind of figuring out how to help each other, how to support each other. You know, I'm taking the kids on this day, you're taking the kids on this day. So it would be really, really helpful to get the cohorts out sooner rather than later if that's the direction that the school committee decides to go, so that families can start to plan. Because for those of us who are working full time, and I'm not convinced on hybrid, and I work full time, and I don't know what I will do with my son if he's remote, but safety to me is way more important. We need to start figuring out what we're going to do with our kids. So it would be really helpful to get the cohorts going sooner rather than later. So that is my last point. Thank you for your time. Thank you for hosting this session.
Thank you, Kelly.
Next is Erica Harrington.
Sorry, I was snuggling my dog. We just got a new puppy. So I'm going to make it quick because I know we're at the end and a lot of things that I had to say have been said. I've also sent an email to all the school committee members and you, so I appreciate you taking the time to read that. I know you have a lot coming at you. I think we heard a lot of comments today about people being concerned about doing virtual learning, and I can't do that again, and it's too hard. And I completely understand what people's opinions are. However, virtual learning can be done well. Like you've said, Marco, we were all caught off guard in the spring. And I think that also there was a lot of mandates. Teachers couldn't do certain things until we got clarification on what was allowed, new learning and otherwise. I know that once they were allowed to do the full virtual learning, my experience, my students at home, I have going into sixth grade, going into second, had fabulous experience. I think it could be even up to more. And so my points that I made in the emails is that I think that the risk that these are lives at here. I mean, our kids could get sick, our teachers could get sick. This isn't like our threat is completely gone. I'm not saying, this dramatic approach, but really it is about people being healthy, and we might just need to be inconvenienced. We might need to be, live difficult lives. Because as much as we all want to go back to normalcy, and we all want to be in a regular world with our kids back in school. I'm a former teacher. I substitute teach. I love school. I want my kids in regular school, but I recognize that we're just not there yet. The risk is too high, and I don't believe in putting my favorite teachers. I think Hudson schools have awesome teachers in this difficult decision. And I think that it puts a strain. When you say you have all these great ideas about this hybrid learning, I still hear a lot of, I don't know, we don't know. There's so many factors going into it. Are our resources better spent putting towards an effective, awesome virtual model? I taught virtual college. It's possible. There's so many resources out there. I think our teachers would invite the training to do it well, and I think they would do it well. I can tell you that my daughter had fabulous teachers, Miss P, Mr. Sanghas, Mrs. Sullivan, that did these tremendous virtual learning. It's still not ideal, but nothing is ideal. And I think that if we go to hybrid learning and we put kids in these classrooms, this isn't going to be school the way they know it. This isn't going to be the best practices for teaching. There's not going to be hands-on learning the way that we're used to. There's not going to be collaborative learning. Teachers are going to be handcuffed. And I think you're going to find your kids are going to come home and say they don't like school. Kids with behavior issues, kids that need to move around are not going to be allowed to do that. So I know I'm going longer than I wanted, but I just am concerned that we're spending all our time and effort and resources building this hybrid model, then we might end up back in virtual learning. And isn't it better to spend our time putting towards a really effective virtual learning model so that everybody can be safe, but also learn in the best way possible during this difficult time? So I just hope that we look at our school committee members, look at the full picture here. I understand we want to be back in school. Is that really what is best for our students, our staff, and our school at this time? So thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone, for all your efforts.
Thank you, Ms. Arrington.
Dan Rabinovitz.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez and the school committee for the opportunity to speak for a few moments. I'll keep it brief. There are two things that I want to address. The first one is starting at the beginning of the call, Dr. Rodriguez, and throughout the conversation, you have repeatedly said things like, there are a whole lot of unknowns. There are things that we don't have. There's information that we don't have yet. And so my question for you and the school committee is, why are we rushing a plan for a hybrid solution when we don't have the answers we need to make an informed decision? My second question is quite frankly a very blunt one. The question is, I'd like to understand what the school committee and Dr. Rodriguez, what your plan is to address what a few folks have asked over the past half hour or so, some in statement form and some more directly, which is, what's the plan, the response plan for, God forbid, if a teacher or a child in this district dies?
So I'll try to respond to your first question first. There are a lot of unknowns. The plan to the state is due on the 10th of this month. So we need to tell the state what type of model we're going to be using with the information we have today, how we're going to open schools in September, right? So we need to provide that information, and the school committee needs to vote on what model we're going to be utilizing come September, knowing that we have a lot of road to cover before September and things can change in a jiff, right? So right now we are using our best information even though we still have things to, to unravel here. But with the best information we have, what's the best plan we feel that is moving forward? And my recommendation to the school committee is the hybrid learning. And they will vote tomorrow whether they accept my recommendation or something different. In terms of your second question, I pray to God that we're never going to cross that line. Because that, regardless of what the situation is, the COVID-19 is something that we are susceptible to that in every single corner that we may travel at any given time. What we're relying on here is getting the best way of mitigating the transmission by what health officials and authorities have told us that can be done, and knowing that the social distancing, the wear of masks and the hand washing and other things that we can do to our facilities to sanitize them constantly and nightly, that we will be able to provide education in our schools in a controlled environment where public access is limited to just the students and staff, monitor each one of them and be able to mitigate through that process, and with the hopes that we're not going to have a lot of cases, but certainly not any fatalities. That is the I don't even want to think of that scenario. But it's we've seen so many of those happening, everywhere, different scenarios, different health conditions, different, situations for each person who has gotten, severely sick and died as a result of the coronavirus. But for now, we want to look at all these indicators, all these indicators that tells us that if we mitigate this in the right way, the same way the state has been observed social distancing and mask using and things of that nature to suppress some of the spread, which now we are in the lowest rates, of transmission. If we can use the same types of procedures and protocols to mitigate what happens inside of our buildings, we'll be able to be successful as well. And within that scenario, try to bring some normalcy to the students' lives who have not been inside of a school or having access to proper services or learning for a few months now. I know there's risk involved in everything we do. This is not the easiest ever. I've in my 30 years of experience in public education, I've never had a situation we have so lack of control of everything that we can possibly have in any given time when you have challenges or predicaments that we have to solve. There's always different ways of approaching it, and this is off the charts. This is uncharted waters for everybody, and we are trying to look with the best information we can what's the most prudent, appropriate way of resuming some type of normalcy for students to attend school by maintaining the social distancing, by creating classroom environment that can support that.
Dr. Rodriguez, I respect that, and I understand that certainly you're in an extremely difficult position from every angle. Mm-hmm. And I understand that there is risk in everything, right? We can walk outside tonight and a meteor could come and hit me as I'm walking my dog down the street. But the reality is that every parent in this town is making risk-based decisions on a day-to-day basis. And the other reality is that hope and prayers are not a plan. And while I appreciate your hope and I appreciate your prayers, and I too share your hope and prayers, I pray that we never have to address that situation. Right. But the reality is that over 400,000 people in this country have died. And while Massachusetts has done a great job of flattening the curve and following the protocols, that all happened under the situation where 0 people were attending schools, 0 people were attending their offices. And so to say that we're hoping and we're gonna use these protocols and expect that my 6-year-old is going to be able to follow those protocols, or that the other 10 6-year-olds in a first grade class are going to be able to do that, and that a teacher is going to be able to adequately meet the requirements to manage those health requirements, and then furthermore get through this year's curriculum, it, quite frankly, is just misplaced faith. And I'll close with, I think, as some other folks have said, that we'd have been better served by pushing this timeline out and building a more comprehensive plan based on the risk and health of our children and our teachers, as opposed to rushing into a decision when we don't have all the answers. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Allison Ripley.
Hi, can you see me?
Yes, and here
okay.
you.
My screen is a little weird. Thank you for giving me this time to talk. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Allison Ripley. I'm a 6th grade social studies teacher at Quinn. I love my job, and I want nothing more than to be back in the classroom with the students when it's safe. You might not know me well. It was my first year in Hudson. Before I came to teaching, I was an archaeologist focused in the ancient Middle East, and I spent my early 20s making trips around the world that were usually only taken by members of the American military. And I say this because I'm used to taking risks for things that I'm passionate about. The only thing that I'm more passionate about than archaeology is teaching, and being with the children of Hudson every day is probably more of an adventure than digging in the dirt halfway across the world. I get to share my love of history, and I get to see them grow as people, and they are wonderful little people. I can't wait to see what they will do when they are the ones who are running the world. I think we have a couple HHS alums who can be running for president in 2040 after listening to this meeting. So I'm willing to take risks for the things that I'm passionate about. Risking that a single one of my students would not get a chance to build that future world is one that I would never take. The world is in the midst of an unprecedented pandemic, and that calls for unprecedented action. The education of our students should be at the utmost priority in order for us to continue as a society. It doesn't need to look like traffic jams of parents frantically dropping their kids off of school. It doesn't need to come at the risk of the lives of students or staff or community members. It doesn't need to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in PPE and sterilization equipment, and it sounds like we might not even get. It doesn't need to look like mass teachers talking at rows of desks for hours, which as a middle school teacher makes me cringe, as I know it will not be effective. If we return to school on the hybrid model proposed, people will lose their lives. While there may be a few cases in Hudson, many teachers travel in from other cities and towns in the state. I, for example, commute in from Alston, a neighborhood in Boston that in September will be rushed with returning BU and BC students from all over the country. They're going to be at my grocery store. No matter how many precautions we take, there are huge risks of us all gathering together from all over the state inside. So what happens when there are new cases in Hudson that stem from all of us gathering in the school? This seems to be a question that we're not sure, I guess, how to answer. The virus will go home with our students, infecting them, their families, and the entire community. Statistically, there will be deaths. Or as I challenge you, we can commit to a full remote learning model now. We can begin training our teachers on technology and innovate remote teaching practices. We can take steps to assure that all of our students have computer and internet access now. We can be better communicating with parents to find out how to make this a good experience for them as well. We can be ahead of the state. We can be leaders in remote learning. While others scramble to transition after the inevitable tragedies that will follow the hybrid model, we will be effectively teaching our students and they will be safe. The children of this community need adults who are willing to be leaders, adults who are willing to stand up to bullying policies that would risk their lives and educations. We have the talent and the resources to develop the best possible remote learning experience for our students until it is safe for them to return to our buildings. We can lead the state and even the nation, and this is the best thing we can do for our students and our community. Instead of falling victim to false optimism, we can be a leader in remote learning. So my question actually was one that was brought up about how are we going to support our students when tragedies happen in this community because everyone's gathering at school. Seems to be we're going to just hope that doesn't happen. But if we were to return on the hybrid model, I would hope that the social and emotional well-being of our students would be placed on priority. So if you don't have anything to add to that, that is my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Courtney Smith.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Oh, very good. Thanks so much for hosting.
Sure.
So it's pretty clear that, at this point, the recommendation from you, Marco, is to push forward this hybrid model. And I'm curious, I have two questions. One, and I'm hoping maybe I misunderstood the plan, but with a hybrid plan and cohorts, if we have cohort A going to school Monday and Tuesday, cohort B going Thursday, Friday, everyone's remote on Wednesday, and cohort C integrates with both A and B. What are our thoughts, and how can we justify this exposure through cohort C mingling with A and B?
So cohort C is not an independent cohort. Cohort C is just a way for us to know that there will be a number of students who will be coming to school every day except Wednesday, right? And be part of their own classrooms. So think of this. So if I am a fourth grade teacher and I have cohort A and cohort B, some of my students are in cohort C and they're just coming to school on the same time. So it's still my 20 kids, my 20 student cohort. It might be that out of my 20 students, 8 is in cohort A, 8 is in cohort B, right? And the other 4 are my cohort C, but they are mingled with my cohorts A and B. So it's not a separate kind of an entity. It's just the same type of students, but the only reason we're calling them cohort C is because the students we are intentionally asking them to be in school 4 days a week because of their needs for services.
Is there a consideration to manage this cohort C so as it does not, potentially infect both cohorts A and B? In that model, it seems as if, why not just have all the kids together, which I think is irresponsible. And that kind of brings me to my next point, or my next question. With the recommendation that just was released by the MTA for fully remote school, are you still confident in your plan to drive forward the hybrid model? And I hope and I implore the school committee who's been on this meeting to listen to the very real concerns for the different stakeholders in our school community, to really look at what these concerns are, understanding that they're very valid. And when an organization like the MTA comes forward and strongly recommends a remote model, what are your thoughts? And have you reconsidered your recommendation for a hybrid model?
Again, I'm considering every aspect. So the MTA have their own set of standards and opinions, which I respect and observe every time. I work very closely with the HEA, so that's part of my job, to do labor management and be on the same page and understanding what the challenges are. But that's not the only indicator that I look at. So when we look into what's the best way of having students to have access to the services that they need, the full remote does not provide the intensity that we're looking for. So knowing that we are a district that have on average 20 students per class, our ability to separate those students into cohorts, that's going to be a very small classroom environment where we can maintain social distancing and try to, again, mitigate all the factors that have been successful in diminishing or preventing the spread of the virus until we have a vaccine. I think because we have those elements, it makes it palatable for us to be able to do what we need to do in a remote way, in a hybrid way. So, and again, I go back to thinking of what do students need and what will be also the consequences or deficits that they will have to endure if they do not return to school and only going to be remote. So there's none of the plans are, it's adorable. None of the plans are actually sound, because the only sound thing would be if we had a vaccine and where everybody could return to school and be there in front of our teachers, right? Mm-hmm. That's not possible at this point in time. So our best scenario right now is looking at the hybrid model. Understanding
I agree.
that,
I think you're neglecting to even acknowledge a remote model, and I think you say the only other scenario and the best scenario is hybrid, and I think at this point it's pretty clear that maybe two parties just are not going to come to agreement on that. So again, I urge the school committee to really think about how our community will be impacted, how our loved ones, how our members of our family at home will be potentially impacted. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Brian White.
Hi, thanks for staying extra late. I know lots of folks have questions. We understand the need for many to have the safest possible in-person instruction, and we also understand the model that you asked to present to the state. We personally would like to see a hybrid model where most students are remote, with in-person schooling taught by staff who are willing and able to be in the building and reserved for your highest needs students and families who need a full-time consistent schedule. So that's the basis, the framework for most of my questions tonight. Mm-hmm. Will teachers have the option for working remotely? And if not, will teachers be allowed to take a leave of absence that retains their seniority and benefits consistent with other medical leave policies?
So every teacher will have a different scenario, right? So we have, under the labor laws, we have family medical leave, or the FMLA. We have leaves that are associated with the contracts that we have, with the association. And we also have the COVID FMLA that also provides some assistance to families. So it depends what category you fall under if you say we cannot return to work physically. So we are dealing with that right now. We have asked the teachers or any personnel, doesn't have to be all teachers, any personnel to let us know, to fill out a form, let us know if they cannot return and why. And then we have to go one case at a time to understand what the circumstances behind each one of those employees who cannot return, and how can we provide ways for them to still be active if they can be active remotely. So that's one of those types of information that we're still waiting for to understand what's the magnitude of the circumstances, and how can we mitigate every single one of those cases to the benefit of the district as well.
Excellent, thank you. Will the school be providing or facilitating COVID testing for the staff or for families that have difficulty getting children to test sites or paying for testing?
Yeah, so that is something that the state is working on our behalf. We don't have all the details yet. And the Department of Education is also working on that, because it's something that is not to our purview. There's a combination of the Department of Public Health for Hudson that takes care of our students and families, local families. And then the state is also looking at, how to put protocols in places where, when we need any type of testing, either for student or staff, it can be done fast and also receive the results faster, right? And not to be a week or more, for the test results to return. So we are waiting for, the governor and the commissioner to work on a plan for us to have a course of action. But that's going to be in partnership with each local DPH.
Okay, thank you. For the Quinn remote learning model, I'm suspecting there may be a typo in the latest plan that was posted today. For cohort D, the remote cohort, it mentions a third-party online platform, but in your comments earlier, you'd mentioned that's just for the high school?
Yeah, it's a typo. We will fix that. That does not apply to the Quinn Middle School.
Okay.
We identified that issue earlier. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Will students be required to have video cameras on for any part of the online meetings?
Yes. Yes, they have to be full participants, yes.
Okay, in your definition, full participation includes the video on 100% of the time?
Yes, correct.
And my last question for tonight is, and I'll ask this again at the individual school forums, how can parents help? We see day in and day out the generosity of our parent families in the school community. We're personally open to donating time and resources and to help prep class materials. To just food for thought as we go into the next month. Know that all of the parents want to be full participants in making whatever models we end up with the most successful for our students.
Yes.
And that's all I've got for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Dr. Rodriguez, we're finished with the parents. We have 9 staff members still in the meeting.
Can we have the staff members, but can you all be brief? I would appreciate if we can see it through, if it's something that has already been talked about. So if you can just relay your message that is different than we have spoken through, will be greatly appreciated.
So I'll go in order. Caitlin Boudreau.
Hello. So good evening. Thank you for having us here tonight. I wrote something because it's a personal thing that I think a lot of people need to hear tonight after listening to all your questions. So I'm speaking tonight on behalf of myself and my aunt Cassia Freitas, who is a teacher at the Farley Elementary School, and I work at Forest Avenue. As an alumni and longtime residents of Hudson, we're concerned about the public health of our community. Recently, we lost our grandmother to COVID-19. She was a para in Hudson Public Schools for 10 years and was loved by many, the Mrs. D. It was traumatic and gut-wrenching. Our family's absolutely still recovering. She was infected because of cross-contamination of an employee at her care facility. Cross-contamination is something that seriously concerns us in working in an elementary school, especially with cohort C and in the building and A and B possibly being exposed in addition to teachers. Things like buses and working in small tier 2 groups really cause great concern for cross-contamination. Having students enter schools will undoubtedly lead to an outbreak and ultimately deaths in our community. Many of us have spoken about this, and while it sounds dramatic, science and numbers tell us that this is a possibility. These are deaths that are absolutely avoidable. We also know that this virus is airborne. More specifically and technically speaking, we're concerned about the state of our buildings. How are keeping all of us inside and having these filters and keeping indoor temperature, the inside temperatures with us wearing masks appropriate? We are very concerned about the return to school, and we look forward to your answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicole Fortoni. Actually Murphy now, but it says Fortoni on your list.
Nicole, are you there?
Yeah, I think she left.
Okay.
Okay. Next is Kyle Morath.
Hello. I'll make sure to make it brief. So far, hey, how are you doing?
Good.
I want to ask a question about, so far we've only been focusing in on individuals who are symptomatic. The CDC estimates that around 40% of infected people show no symptoms at all. So what I'm wondering is, what is Hudson doing to address asymptomatic spread of the disease in schools? Thank you.
Sure. It will be the same protocol. I mean, those are the unknowns. We have to monitor our daily routines. And if there is any potential case in our schools, we're going to have to do the tracing. That is the biggest part, that it's unknown for any institution, any place, because you can be asymptomatic and be out and about, and even within your family. So those are the pieces that we're going to have to to monitor very closely and understand if there are cases where people are asymptomatic, because that's a reality that is like the invisible piece that we don't know until someone is exposed and actually contract the virus. That's the piece that is the biggest unknown for everybody. At least if you have some of the symptoms where you have headaches, fever, or any other type of thing that can give clues to the nurse and other people, that's the unknown part. There's two pieces for us. We have mostly young individuals who have who could have those, but we also lay on the fact that those individuals are also in the household. We have adults, so unless every adult is asymptomatic and no one is is susceptible, so it's the triage component and the tracing that's going to be the most important piece for us to understand if there is a situation, how to mitigate that, like anything else. But that's the invisible one is the hardest one.
Thank you.
Nicole Murphy, go ahead. Thanks for joining.
Sorry, I had a little bit of an internet issue there. So I'm a teacher at Forest, and as a teacher, one of my primary tasks will be making sure that students are safe while they're learning. The main ways that we're being told right now that kids will be kept safe is that they need to wear a mask and stay within their assigned space throughout the day. My concern about second graders and obviously younger children is that they have a very difficult time following restrictive rules like this. And so keeping their masks on, staying in this very small space that they must stay in is going to be very difficult for them. So if these two guidelines are not followed by all of the students, then the safety of everyone in that classroom is compromised. So in an effort to be sure that all students are safe all day long, my question is, what is the district's plan for when a student doesn't follow these guidelines?
So that's a good question. So one of the things that we intend to do in the first 10 days of professional development with the teachers is actually understand and do the, you know, the dry run per se of what that's going to look like, right? So think of the fact that your classroom now will have at least half of the students that you ordinarily had. Even though they are going to be assigned to a seat, there will be space, you know, around the seat. It's going to be 6 to 8 feet, you know, in between seats. So we're trying to visualize what's the classroom is going to look like in terms of space, in terms of routines. The teacher is going to have to you know, provide, you know, that routine, that new routine to everybody. This is not just elementary. Everybody, I think, is going to have to find a different routine. That's why I keep saying that school will not be the same, right? The experience won't look the same, won't feel the same anymore. So we all going to have to be contented with that piece. And then, you know, if a student is not, participating in the protocols, and it's going to be on an individualized basis, the same way as we, routinely, talk to parents or we do different types of training or anything. So not everyone's going to react the same. And we're just going to have to be prepared to, to go one student at a time. But one thing that I already kind of think in my mind that I have talked to the principals about this is that this not should be a disciplinary issue, right? This is a different type of routine that we need to contend with, that we need to educate, that we need to project what types of, of information and routines we have to create for the younger ones, the older ones. It's just going to kind of going to be the ebb and flow process for a while until new routines are set. It will be different for everybody, not just that, but other things as well.
Brian Blake.
Hi, thank you for talking to me tonight. Can you hear me?
Hi, Brian. Yes, Brian.
Good. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for taking all the extra time.
Sure.
My questions are pertaining to safety, of course, and communication. Given that about 60% of people tested in Massachusetts have to wait 5 days or longer for results, what plans do we actually have in place now to take steps during that waiting period? I'm hoping you'll be able to talk about steps we can take to communicate possible exposures to the families in that cohort or to students or to staff. Also keeping in mind that a lot of these students have siblings at AMSA or Assabet or other buildings in the district. And just hoping that there are actual plans in place while that waiting period is going on. Because if we have to wait 5 days for test results to say anything, isn't that a little too late?
Absolutely. No, the communication has to be immediate. I think I mentioned this before. One of the things that is to our advantage is that our nurses have been working for the Hudson DPH in a tracing and the communication and communicating with families, and so they have been accustomed to that protocol already. We have also enhanced our nursing database system called SNAP to also have now the capability to create a tracing mechanism for any kind of activities in our schools. So the communication has to be as clean and precise as the DPH allows us to do as well. So it'll depend on in each condition will be different. Some isolation is 10 days, some isolation is 14 days. So we are going to follow the medical protocol that's in place already and follow that to the T, because that's what's going to guarantee us the best results, because the routine's already in place. We're not deviating from the protocols that DPH already has.
So are all those steps, Marco, taking place after a positive result is reported to the school, or are those steps to communicate to other buildings and to families taking place before the test result comes back?
Right. So there are two parts, right? So the part that, if there's suspicion there's a combination of symptoms that suggest, COVID, then, that there's a protocol for that. Isolation and kind of isolation means being home and things of that nature. Then if there is a positive, if the test comes in and is negative, the child can return to school. And if it's just an isolation for, after a testing is about 10 days. If it's just suspicious and quarantine is 14 days. So we're going to follow each one of those, but each scenario going to be what is the mechanism that triggered a suspicion, or in fact, for some reason, we just discovered someone had COVID because a test was done, but no symptoms had been realized in our school. So every scenario is going to be different, because it will be the onset of the knowledge, whether it's a set of symptoms or a testing results that trigger. So each one of those scenarios have sort of a set of actions that needs to be taken by our school and by DPH to support the student and the families. And to your point, if a student is, it could be a student who also parent works in a different school in the district that also has a sibling that go to a private school. So it could be the network of that could be immense. So it will depend on the circumstance of each individual.
Thank you.
Sure.
Victoria Cordero.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Victoria.
Hi, thank you so much for staying late. So I am a teacher and a parent in the district. My son is an incoming 8th grader, and he is really excited to start Hudson High. I agree that in-person learning is much more powerful than remote. I don't think anyone's debating that.
However, we are not going back to in-person learning pre-COVID. This is in-person learning during a pandemic. So I'm going to ask questions. I wasn't part of the teaching and learning task force, so I'm just going to ask questions about what this will look like. Pre-COVID teaching was dynamic, and students were constantly moving around and working together. They were flexible seating options, dancing, singing, make-up skits, you name it, we've done it. But this in-person learning proposed doesn't seem like good teaching practice at all. I'm concerned about this. I want to know, is it going to be student-centered? How can it be hands-on? My son, I'm speaking as a parent, on top of having many family members who are high risk, my son has ADHD and cannot sit still that long. Looking at the guidance, he will sit all day with few movement breaks, wearing a mask for 6 hours without any kind of socialization with his friends, or at least that's how I've read it. I am unsure how this is the least restrictive environment for him, and I worry for his social emotional health. I am seriously considering opting for remote for my child so that he can be at home at his desk in a comfortable and less stressful learning space with frequent movement breaks and the opportunity to work with his peers in a virtual setting. So I have 3 questions. Just for clarification, I know there was just a lot of conversation about this, and I know this came out recently. At the high school level, will my student not have teachers from HHS? And how can we ensure that our remote students feel part of the school community? My second question are, what are ways that you are going to ensure that students with hyperactivity and just students, the kids, have movement during the day? And then my third question is, how are you going to prevent in-person pandemic learning from becoming a lecture style model?
Yes, Victoria, all good questions. And as I said before, education, regardless how we return, it will never be the same, right? For a while until this pandemic and vaccines and things of that nature. So it won't feel the same, won't look the same. To your point, our classrooms, we worked so hard for many years to move away from the set rows of chairs and desks and everybody facing forward and the teacher lecturing, right, into the dynamic grouping, kind of style. So all that has kind of been putting limitations on what we can do. I think the creativity that we have to bring forth is how to maneuver around a day that, yes, everybody has an assigned seat, but there will be ways for movement, right? There will be, because, yeah, your son has ADHD, but some students don't have ADHD, but still you can't sit still for the entire time. The same way as a mask breaks, right? So we need breaks, right? And then we're not going to say this is the times we're going to have break. Break is going to happen when it's needed, right? So we're going to try to be as flexible as possible. So there are those types of times where if that's everybody's saturated here, we need a little break, we'll break in whatever way that we can maintain the social distance. I think one thing to think about too is that the reality of maintaining a mask break, for example, right, is when everybody has to be 6 feet apart. Well, we are going to be 6 feet apart because of this model. So there is an opportunity for us to sometimes, depending on how orderly we do things, if we cannot go outside where there's fresh air that we can, they can be outside for a little while, maintain the 6 feet and remove the mask and be able to take a break there. So the other model, the in-person, it was not conducive that way because we need to be in a situation where everybody's 3 or more feet apart. Then we couldn't allow those things. That would have to be really separating people and going to different locations to be able to have the 6 feet separation before you remove your mask. So all these things are going to be scenarios that we're going to play with, and we're going to try to be as flexible as possible for the sake of what you're just saying, is allowing the classroom, teacher and students to flow in a way that it's not so tight and regimented, but at the same time you maintain the standards of practice that we need to maintain, but allow some flexibility for some movement, for mask breaks and things that will break a little bit of the routine, even though the routine is not going to be the same routine that we have endured and cherished in the past. So that's going to be a different learning for everybody. And as we go through that process, we'll learn what works best and what doesn't, and learning from the practices that we're going to have on a daily basis to be able to maneuver around these challenges. They're going to be a challenge no matter what.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I'll just end. I can't help but feel that we're risking the lives of students, teachers, families, and community members for an potentially ineffective teaching and learning environment. I'm confident that with our amazing Hudson educators and the weeks we now have for planning, we can create a dynamic and creative remote learning experience. We might have to think outside the box, but thinking in person with social distance measures, I don't know how we can create that environment yet. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Donna Monjo.
Hi, thank you for staying and continuing for us. I teach at the high school, and I would like to say that remote learning is very difficult. I understand that, and I had a really difficult time getting started with it when we started to do it in the spring. It got better as we went along and as more kids participated. I had some kids that actually participated more during remote learning than they did in person because they could meet with us online one-to-one, and they wouldn't necessarily come into class after school and do it. So for some students, I think the remote learning works as well as in person. However, I understand that in person is really our optimal situation overall. But I have a couple of questions for you. One of them is clarification. Earlier, I thought you mentioned that on Monday, Tuesday, there would be one lesson taught. And then on Thursday, Friday, you would reteach it to the cohort B people.
That's correct.
Okay. But then you also mentioned that when the people were doing their remote learning, that they were going to be learning something new as well. So I'm confused about that.
All right. So it's not. So what I'm meant with that is that in the past, we have look at whatever situations we had in the spring. The remote learning was not something that was new material, new learning. That was the protocol from the state and a defined, or a different set of standards, for what needed to be covered. Moving forward, new learning will happen every day. The teacher doesn't have to necessarily be in the room for new learning. New learning will continue to extend beyond that point. So whatever you're teaching for your group on Group A, for example, Monday and Tuesday, the lessons that you may have on Wednesday morning when you have to meet with your group, and then whatever carries through Thursday and Friday is not just maintenance of what was taught Monday and Tuesday, but could be some research, could be some other active things that they have to do independently that will enable students to continue to expand their knowledge of the material, and not just perhaps maintenance of what was taught. So new learning or new material or new research or new opportunities will happen throughout the week, regardless if the student is inside of our classroom in front of you or if they are working at home independently, because the independent work has to be meaningful and has to be also part of an extension of the learning that is happening with whatever lesson you have prepared. So the week's kind of approach will be that students will be interacting with materials outside, being independent, but not just maintaining what they learned, but expanding on that they're learning according to what you have planned for them.
Okay, so like an application or something to that effect.
Correct. Yes.
Oh, all right, thank you. And then my other question has to do with just sort of logistics and cleaning and things like that.
Sure.
You've mentioned a few times that, on a daily basis, we may put everyone's out at different risk and different things like that. But I feel like it's not really the same type of a risk. I haven't been doing indoor type of like activities at different venues or things. The size of groups that you tend to be with are definitely much smaller. If you've been even to an outdoor restaurant or anything, they clean everything down in between each person that goes through. Right. So at the high school particularly, we change classrooms, we share classrooms, we have our students are bigger and larger and take up more space, obviously, because they're older. And to have them in that small space, what happens in between classes? Like, do we sanitize in between each class? And how does that happen? Teachers share classrooms. That means materials are going back and forth. And we have our prep blocks generally outside of our classroom in another office, someplace else that's a rather small office that a number of people share. So I have questions.
Sure. No, absolutely. All valid questions too. So we are working on all these different scenarios, knowing that, at the elementary level, it's going to be way more stationary, going to be a lot of push-in with an easier model, quote unquote. Then as you go to the middle school and high school, you have greater number of transitions, not just for classrooms, but sometimes the teacher is going to be transitioning from classroom to classroom, like you just described. So we are going to make sure that there is a cleaning protocol happening, between classes, primarily classes that have, for example, stationary computers, right? It's not just dependent on the students' Chromebooks, but they are stations where they use computers. Make sure that we sanitize everything, in between classes. But most importantly, every night, there'll be a deep cleaning for every one of those areas, including that yawn mist that we have. That is one of the most powerful things we have, because that goes into it kind of involves every single surface of any given environment. So if you even look at the keyboard of a computer, desks, knobs, and anything that is going to be sanitized nightly. But there will be those scenarios where when we have transitions, we're going to have a plan in place to make sure that the places are clean and sanitized. There will be, I think, a collective effort from everybody. We're going to have products in place. We're going to have wipes. We're going to have all things that are easy for anyone to kind of quickly clean up their surface if they need. That is safe. That is not, products that we that we have secured. They're going to be easy for just wiping a surface if it's necessary, just again, to an additional precaution.
Okay, can I have one more, if that's okay?
Sure.
Sorry. The number of class sizes, do we have any idea? Because they also talk about it's not really a great idea to have prolonged exposure in an enclosed area with a number of people and so on and so on. And the other part of that is when we're wearing masks and we're trying to project to the whole classroom so that the kids can hear us and understand us, I can see that that could be a difficult situation as well.
Yes, I mean, I think those are the things that you're going to have to determine as you have your classroom, depending on the room that you're in, to understand what's the best way of of delivering the lesson, like you just said, with a mask on. So I think that's going to be something that we're going to learn along the way. What's the best way, depending on the room that you're in. But the classroom sizes, we're creating the schedule as we speak. That we are proposing a different schedule for the high school, and the goal is to have a reduced size, of classroom. The perfect world is going to be half and half, right? So if you typically had a classroom of, 24 kids, you're going to have 2 classes of 12, counting that everyone will be present and everyone will be participating, right? So we still don't know how many students are going to be in the cohort D. They're going to extract some of the enrollment numbers that we have. But every classroom, again, is going to look different because we are deploying a different type of schedule that may, have variations here and there. But the goal is to have a balanced number of students per class to allow, again, for the social distance. But in any case scenario, we are estimating that to be between 6 and 8 feet separation per classroom, per student. And then, of course, and a greater, portion of the classroom for the teachers as well.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Was that Zenner?
Hi, thank you for your time and your hard work. I'm a reading specialist at Farley. I want to say first that I've been tutoring all summer, and using a mask is very difficult, and that's one-on-one. It's a real compromise. I do also echo Mrs. Harrington's feeling that remote learning can be done well, and that since we plan to do it at some point, most likely it would be great to invest in that. I have 2 questions. One is, what is the district's message to families in terms of staying safe outside of school? Because students will socialize, and I want to make sure that whatever's happening is consistent with what the school is doing. The other is that the numbers are going up in Massachusetts. In Middlesex County alone, there's 1 in 62 confirmed cases as of today. And so for a student body of 1,600, that's 25 students. And that doesn't count kids coming together. That doesn't count asymptomatic carriers. So I hear you saying that the question is not if, but when, in terms of going virtual. So my question is, why not spend the first few weeks of school preparing students and families for that, meeting outside in a safe place, under a tent with the teacher, with the family, in a small group, and setting up kids to be successful virtually, since we know that is likely to come our way?
Sure. I think to your first question, I think that the messaging to families has to be the same messaging that's happening throughout every community and from every direction. Everyone has a part in this. If we all do our part, we will minimize the spreading of the transmission of this disease. No question about it. So we need to rely also on families, like I said before, to be the first screeners before students leave their homes. And be able to be, communicating with us effectively in a timely manner, so we can all be prepared, right? So be able to support everybody in that manner. In terms of your second question, is my first concern is about full remote. We will not service properly our highest need population. I know there are mechanisms in the way that we can do that, but it's not the same. I think the amount of exposure or lack of exposure some students have had is already have had a detriment, in this past few months that we were, full remote. And I'm concerned about the longitudinal effect of that if we continue to only support students remotely, because as you know, and you work, very closely with students, the importance of that, that connection, and particularly for those who need more support, right? So even though we have identified students with disabilities, we have identified students with 504s and English learners, but we still have a significant, if you look at just the MCAS results and the strata of students that we have, that still doesn't fall into any of the subgroups that are the high needs group, they still struggle a lot. So just by nature of thinking that those students who have only support remotely and be independent and rely on families to support them academically virtually for the entire experience, I think that's a huge detriment. And again, going back to numbers today are favorable. Numbers can change at any time, right? So numbers can change at any time, and we know we've seen this throughout the country. We just, hope that Massachusetts continues to, even though there has been a spike here and there in numbers, they still at the 2%, rate of transmission, which has been there for over a month now. And hopefully that is just, again, those are these crazy parties that have been perked up here and there in different places at the Cape, where has exacerbated the number of cases in the Commonwealth. So hopefully we're going to continue to see the numbers being favorable, that allows us to have more opportunities with the students. There'll be some remote, but at least there'll be some face-to-face, the much needed face-to-face that some of our students, particularly those in Group C, that will greatly benefit from being in school more regularly. Again, it's not the perfect scenario, but we need to find ways of bridging that learning gap that exists from students who, if they're not in front of a teacher, in front of you as a reading specialist, how do they actually cope with the deficit that they need, or the deficit they have in terms of the learning growth that they need. And as you know, even we look at, we don't have to look at COVID, we look at data associated with the summer, right? The summer, so-called the summer slide, and everything that we see, in regards to that. So think of that extending that summer now for several months. And for some students, that slide will continue to be a regression. So that's my greatest preoccupation as well. And of course, you got to keep everybody, to the best of our ability, safe, and healthy in our schools. And that's how mitigating the facts inside our schools, making our schools an environment that to the best of our knowledge and ability will be able to maintain a very sanitized, place with great protocols, in place. Hopefully that will be our success in maintaining some of our students at school.
So, Dr. Rodriguez, there are just two questions that were in the chat that I think we should address. There were staff members that weren't able to stay on the meeting, so I will just read it to you.
Sure.
The first is from Danielle Wood. She said her question is that several times it has been asked what exactly happens when there's a case in a classroom. The response has been that CDC guidelines will be followed. No specifics have been stated. If my son or daughter is in a class in which there's a COVID case or possible exposure to COVID, will I be notified each time?
Okay, so again, I don't have the CDC guidelines in front of me, and it's the same guidelines that the nurses will be following. So if we read that, there are case scenarios for each one of these cases. So if anyone reads that document, you'll see exactly what the steps will be for each one of those particular events.
Thank you. And then another statement and a question from Lindsay Souza. She is an EL teacher at the high school. She said the surveys have come up more than once during the meeting, and I want to mention for the benefit of everyone listening that one survey came from administration in mid-July via school email that did not capture a majority of teacher voices. The HEA has since sent a survey that reached many more teachers because it was provided via text message as well as personal email. At this time, I don't think those results have been shared with the school committee. And then her question is, how have you ensured that you are hearing a majority of teacher voices during this off-season time? Also, how have you ensured that you are adequately representing teachers' concerns to the school committee, given the fact the administration's survey did not represent all teacher voices?
So again, the survey was available to all the teachers. We had, I think, 350 or 60 participants. It was open for a good gap of time where they had the ability to provide their voice. So we captured as many voices as were addressed in the respondents that provided some answer. I understand that the HEA has now conducted 2 different types of surveys recently to just capture more information. And I think to the question about how do I get in tune in looking at the voices of the teachers, one of the methods there is my constant meetings with labor management. We meet together to discuss what the concerns are. Recently, I had a labor management, and there were a page with probably 2 pages of questions that we went through just to make sure that I heard what the membership was saying. So we continue to have that type of open communication. It's not just about the survey. The survey is one instrument that we have used to capture some information. The same as the information we got from parents was one moment in time we capture that information. Is not the end all be all. Is again one metric, one piece of information that we can look into to look at the whole picture. But again, I have communicated with some teachers via email. But HEA is my biggest portal as well, because we're in constant communication about the needs for the membership and also for what we're trying to do to support our teachers in the returning.
And that is it for the evening.
Okay, so thank you everybody for participating, and those who are listening from home. We have cataloged all the questions that came via email. We haven't been able to respond to them throughout this event. I'm sure some of the questions were answered just by virtue of all the conversation that we had this evening, but we will catalog. We already cataloged all of the questions. We'll provide answers to those, and we'll put those in those who are the cluster as best as we can those questions, and put them in a frequently asked questions document. So we're going to continue to expand that document in the next few days, right? So 2 things. One is actually 3 things. One is the all the comments and questions we received from the parent survey. We have transformed those into FAQs. We will do so for those questions that we have received in the past few days in anticipation of this event. And then there are now 5 opportunities, though each on the schools will have, the principals will conduct a meeting just like this one for parents, and we'll be there as well to support the principals to answer any questions you may have in the meantime. So it's going to be, again, a fluid situation. This is not an easy task for any of us, including the school committee. But it's something that we have to agree to need to have a destination when comes September. Unfortunately, the due date for us to provide the plan for the state is due Monday the 10th. So that's why the school committee is meeting on Thursday. And we hope to have more discussions then on the floor to be able to guide the school committee's thoughts and information they need to know before they make a decision and vote on what type of model we're going to be using come September. All right. So thank you very much for everybody for being here. School committee members of the task force team, thank you for enduring a way more time that we had originally discussed. So I'll see you all some other time. Thank you very much.